Chapter 769. The Power of Formations. A Shattering Void Tier Ice Dragon. Theoretically, the ice dragon was invincible because it was formed by a formation, and as long as the formation was still present, it would be undying, which obviously meant invincibility. However, it was also precisely because it was formed by a formation that once the formation broke, it would naturally disappear, still having its weakness. Were formations easy to break? Ling Han had Helian Sun Shui attack the formation's eye with full strength while he controlled the ice dragon not to attack Helian Sun Shui. Hong. Helian Sun Shui attacked. She now increased her cultivation to the peak stage of the heaven tier, but the last step was too hard to cross, making her unable to break through for a long time. This step could take 3 to 5 years, and could also take 30 to 50 years, or 300 to 500 years. She could be even unable to break through in her lifetime. The difference between the Shattering Void and the Heaven tier was fundamental, and definitely couldn't be crossed over simply by spending a long time. Even so, Helian Sun Shui's attacks were still extremely swift and fierce, and unleashing one move seemed to be able to flatten the entire Imperial Palace. It wasn't impossible. Shattering Void tier elites could strike down the stars in the sky, so what would be so strange about a Heaven tier elite flattening an Imperial Palace? Hong, the attack smashed into the formation. The entire formation was instantly blasted back nearly 300 meters, but 108 formation's eyes maintained the original spacing, while the ice dragon was also still present, coiling behind Ling Han and emitting a bone-penetrating chill. My full-strength attack actually can't break this formation. Helian Sun Shui was shocked. She cultivated both origin power and physical arts, and on top of her own freakishness, though unable to break through the barrier of the Shattering Void tier, she was still infinitely close to that level. Too astonishing. Ling Han was extremely pleased. 10th tier formations were 10th tier formations indeed, not even breaking under a heaven tier elite's bombardment. Let this lady try. Yi Shuang appeared, looking like she was itching to have a go. You. Ling Han pondered. Let's go into the sky. I'm afraid that if you lose control, you'll destroy my Imperial Palace that totem of mine just formed. Above the Imperial Palace, there was a very faint shadow of a black tower. It was Great Ling Empire's totem, but it had just formed. According to Yi Shuang's statement, after aggregating the power of the people's minds, it could become corporeal and protect the country forever. If the nation was present, the tower would be present, and if the nation perished, the tower would perish. The two of them rose into the sky. Ling Han still controlled the ice dragon to remain motionless, letting Yi Shuang attack. This was mainly to see the formation's defense's limit. The first attack, Battle Prowess of the Shattering Void tier, 1 star. Yi Shuang was also very cooperative and lifted a palm to swat at the formation, unleashing supreme might. If the ice dragon didn't stand in front of Ling Han, he wouldn't possibly be watching the battle at such a close distance. The power of the Shattering Void tier surpassed reason and made him slightly worried. Even if he used Black Tower's power boost now, would he be able to reach Shattering Void tier battle prowess? Hong. The palm swiped by, and the formation was obviously knocked flying several hundred meters, but it was still very well maintained as the ice dragon was still present. The second attack, Shattering Void tier 2 stars. The third attack, Shattering Void tier 3 stars. After the fifth attack, the formation finally collapsed. Unable to endure battle prowess of Shattering Void tiers 5 stars, the 108 formation's eyes scattered everywhere. This was the limit. Ling Han retrieved the formation's eyes, set up the formation again and said, "Now try it when the ice dragon's present, and see how many stars of Shattering Void tier battle prowess it can reach." Yi Shuang directly charged up with Shattering Void tier 5 stars battle prowess, while the ice dragon launched a counterattack. The sky instantly turned into a field of chilling ice. Even heaven tier elites would be frozen into a lump of ice if they were too close, and could only attack few times in the distance. Yi Shuang was suppressed and couldn't rival the ice dragon, but she immediately raised her battle prowess, star by star. Shattering Void tier 7 stars. Soon the limit of the formation was found out. It was able to equal Shattering Void tier 7 stars when Yi Shuang increased her battle prowess to 8 stars. The ice dragon was immediately suppressed, and the formation was blasted apart once again not much later. Ling Han was extremely pleased. Although there were many Shattering Void tier elites now, how many could surpass battle prowess of Shattering Void tier 7 stars? According to what Helian Sun Shui said, The entire Hellion royal family only had 3 such elites. The sea race's monstrousness lay in that they all possessed true dragon's blood, and those with a profound bloodline could borrow ancestral blood at the heaven tier to summon a true dragon, from which they could comprehend the profoundness of the shattering void tier, making the breakthrough of this stage far easier for them compared to others. However, after advancing into the shattering void tier, the power of bloodline would almost be exhausted, and only a few would be able to exceed the 5th layer of the shattering void tier, and the majority would possess 2-star or 3-star shattering void tier battle prowess till death. This time, even if the Xianyu family sent a shattering void tier elite over, Ling Han would still be unafraid, for Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation was enough to deal with them. They wouldn't dispatch all their strongest elites at once, right? Why are you willing to help me? Ling Han asked Yi Shuang. This lady is in love with you. Is that reason okay? Yi Shuang said very casually. Hee. Ling Han laughed. It was too fake, but he still said, naturally, this young master is handsome and easygoing and has amazing martial arts talent, so it only stands to reason to be liked by tens of thousands of girls. Pa! Yi Shuang spat and said, you're just a frog at the bottom of a well, not knowing what freakishness is. Might as well tell you, in the divine realm, there are plenty of those in their 20s that crossed into the shattering void tier. Take this lady for example, the shattering void tier at 27 years old. Ling Han let out a ha, pointed at her and said, you finally admitted that you're from the divine realm. Yi Shuang arched her snow-white neck like a proud white swan, and said, so what, are you going to bite me? Ling Han sighed. Why was this woman such a scoundrel? What a rogue. He was curious and asked, then why don't you return to the divine realm, and why help maidens say that you're a good person? I don't believe it. Yi Shuang half opened her small mouth, and after a while said, why can't this lady be a good person? From head to toe, and from in and out, you don't look anywhere like a good person. Ling Han shook his head resolutely. From in and out? TSK, damn brat, you're one bold pervert. Say, when did you peep at this lady? Yi Shuang snapped her fingers, giving off crackling sounds. Okay, don't be so bored and don't turn aside the topic. Ling Han said with a serious look. Although having a powerful shattering void tier elite's help is awesome, I want even less to have an unstable element beside me. Yi Shuang snickered and said, aren't you afraid of this lady turning on you when you say such things? You have to know, for a small guy like you, this lady picks river snails with 3 fingers snatch and never miss. Chapter 770. The Divine World and the Underworld. Ling Han stared at Yi Shuang. What? Is there something on this lady's face? Yi Shuang said. There's not, but I'm curious. Can't you just interrogate me with your abilities? Ling Han asked. Ha. Were you born with wretchedness in your bones? This lady's not torturing you, and you're still not pleased? Yi Shuang rolled her sleeves and said, then this lady had better not be polite. Hee. Ling Han waved his hand. I'm not being wretched, it's just pure curiosity if there's anything that can tie up a shattering void tier elite. Yi Shuang cocked her head, thought for a while and said, all right, this lady is a divine being, but in this small world, this lady has to suffer the suppression of the heavenly Tao. What is meant by the heaven has eyes is that if this lady overdoes it, she'll be met with the realm's repulsion. Isn't that just right? You can return to the divine realm, Ling Han said. Yi Shuang rolled her charming eyes and said, if this lady could return to the divine realm at will, would she not want to? But this world's been sealed off by a killing formation, and if this lady is repelled by the realm's force, she'll definitely be finished off by the killing formation. You're the divine being, you're the greatest, what's there to be afraid of? Ling Han said with a smile. Nonsense, this lady has been suppressed for 100,000 years, with all the blood essence absorbed, and if she still had the power in former years, would she still need to be afraid? Yi Shuang said extremely furiously. Hey, how many years old of an old monster are you? Ling Han felt disgusted. This woman kept saying this lady, but in reality she was a monster that couldn't be any older. What's that look in your eyes? This lady is forever young. Besides, to convert it to this lady's lifespan, she's only now in the prime of youth. Yi Shuang slapped the table, looking like she was about to eat someone. As expected, Age was women's pet peeve and shouldn't be touched. Ling Han changed the topic and said, "In short, your attacking me would enrage the heavenly DOA, and then you'd be repelled and end up dead." Not that exaggerated, it's mainly that this lady cherishes talent. Yi Shuang wasn't pleased with his wording. Ling Han knew that she definitely wouldn't speak all the truth. The things that involved the crux obviously wouldn't be revealed. But for now, she indeed wouldn't lay hands on him. He changed the subject and said, "Do you know Azura Demon Emperor?" "TSK, a lackey of the underworld." "What demon emperor? He even dares to call himself an emperor?" Really making this lady laugh her head off. Yi Shuang said in disdain. She proved to be a real divine being, daring to look down on Azura Demon Emperor, who was split into 9 parts and suppressed, still living after countless millennia, was absolutely a monster amongst monsters. "Hold on." Ling Han was startled and said, "Azura Demon Emperor is from the underworld. A wisp of demonic chi born in the underworld that became a living spirit through countless years and entered the divine realm through the divine realm and underworld's barrier, and then was utterly defeated. Originally thought to be dead, it turns out he was just sealed here," Yi Shuang said, but she immediately let out a faint sound of surprise and said, "Why not kill him? Maybe Azura Demon Emperor escaped here, and the elites in the divine realm can't enter?" Ling Han speculated. Yi Shuang first nodded, but then shook her head and said, "The small world rejects the outsiders, and it's hard to exit, but even harder to enter even for people of the divine realm, not to mention Azura Demon Emperor from the underworld. This matter's definitely strange." Ling Han was astounded. From his perspective, Azura Demon Emperor was hunted in the divine realm and had to escape to the small world of the vast lands in the end. This was only to be expected. So why was it suddenly strange? How about the 1,000 Corpse sect? "I heard the divine realm also has this sect," Ling Han asked again. "You brat, why do you have so many questions, aren't you annoying?" Yi Shuang's patience was apparently not so good. "Come, serve up good tea, snacks and fruits." Ling Han waved his hand, and there immediately were palace maids that delivered all sorts of delicacies, which were all cultivated in the Black Tower. To mislead people, Ling Han placed many of them in the reserve and took it out from there ordinarily. "You think this lady is a chow hound?" Yi Shuang protested, but soon began to eat delightfully. The things grown inside the Black Tower were indeed delicious, and even she praised them unceasingly. "All right, this lady will slightly disclose some secrets for you to know, but each realm has its rules, and this lady can't speak too much, or else she might be targeted." She pointed at the sky, obviously meaning the eye of heavenly Tao. Ling Han nodded and said, "You speak whatever you will, and I'll listen casually. Nothing will be held." Yi Shuang snickered and said, "The vast lands is a small world with incomplete rules and space, and just like a sealed pond, the sky you guys can see is only that large, and the world that can be reached is only that wide. It has an end." Ling Han nodded. "So, shattering void tier elites were able to strike down the stars in the sky here, but if it were a true world, each star would be at least the size of the vast lands, so how could it be struck down? And the divine realm could be said as connected rivers and seas. You can enter the rivers through the lakes, and enter the seas through the lakes. It's boundless," Yi Shuang said. "It is a large world, at least from what this lady knows. No one can explore the ends of it." Ling Han was shocked even divine beings didn't know how large the divine realm was. How immense was that world? However, between heaven and earth, if there's a positive, there must be a negative, a yin to yang, and evil to good, Yi Shuang went on. There's an underworld that exists side by side with the divine realm. It can be viewed as an overlapping space, but we can neither see nor interfere with each other. But in reality, the two worlds are overlapping, so how can there be no interference at all? The underworld's chi is constantly seeping into the divine realm, affecting the living beings of the divine realm, and the two worlds also come into conflict. At the place where the conflict is most intense, the realm barrier is very, very thin, and the underworld's cultivators can enter the divine realm as they please. The 1,000 Corpse sect is called Hades in the divine realm, and was created by some of the almighties that entered the divine realm from the underworld. The 1,000 Corpse sect here is one of its sub-branches. Their purpose is to bring chaos to the divine realm and turn it into the second underworld. If the two worlds could fuse, their level would definitely increase by a cut. Ling Han was left speechless. He was here thinking about splitting open the skies and ascending to the divine realm. But the divine realm didn't seem to be much safer, being targeted by the underworld. Maybe it'd really become a world of monsters and demons in the end. Is the divine realm inferior to the underworld? He asked. Since the two worlds were parallel, then the divine realm shouldn't be weak. Yi Shuang rolled her eyes and said, the underworld covets the divine realm, that's one matter, and whether they can take it down or not, that is another matter. At least from what this lady knows, although countless campaigns took place over hundreds of millions of years in the two worlds, now the underworld is still the underworld, and the divine realm is still the divine realm. Neither side can deal with the other. Besides, you think that the divine realm doesn't want to absorb the underworld. They're both like two dogs, so how can you call either noble? Chapter 771. An Imminent Great Battle. Yi Shuang really wasn't courteous, and simply condemned the two worlds as dogs. Ling Han, however, laughed loudly. He was also extremely daring and liked to break old rules, and felt that Yi Shuang matched his character somewhat. He couldn't help but look forward to it, and said, after I arrive at the divine realm, I have to get around. Yi Shuang sneered, and said, if you can really successfully split open the skies, then you'll definitely be forced by the large forces in the divine realm to resist the underworld's invasion army at the realm barrier. Ling Han frowned and said, even if I could, my strength would be barely in the god tier. Wouldn't I just be cannon fodder joining the great battle at the barrier wall? You're right. Yi Shuang clapped and said, they'll exactly having you be cannon fodder. If you don't die, how would they rationally annex your nation? You have to know that the territories in the divine realm are extremely precious. Which force doesn't want to establish a nation, and which nation doesn't want to expand its territory? Once you die, they'll marry your daughter, or marry off a woman to your son, and your divine nation will obviously be certain to become theirs. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh and said, the people in the divine realm are also quite shameless. Hee, you think that there's a divine word in divine realm because the people are all straightforward and upright? Yi Shuang sneered. It's just the arts that are cultivated and the environment that's different. Otherwise, what difference is there between the underworld and the divine realm? Ling Han nodded. There were good people and bad people everywhere, and to differentiate them by territory would be too dogmatic. Then I'd bet a plan for the great troubles after splitting open the skies, he muttered. However, that's something that won't be an issue for a long time. The current problem should be dealt with first. Yi Shuang obviously wouldn't march westward with Ling Han, and Ling Han had no plans for that, either. If she kept watch of the imperial city, nothing would go wrong. She was a divine being. Even with her vitality greatly damaged, she could still rival the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. He assembled the army. This time, he inevitably personally took to the field, commanding the army westward to take down another city. After carrying out a round of sacrificial offerings, the army set out, advancing west to the region wall. Except for Helian Sun Shui, Lu Yutong, Li Xichan, and his parents, who stayed in the imperial city, the others all set out, including Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiao. These two advanced into the Flower Blossom Tier 1 was at the 9th layer, and the other was at the 5th layer. With the aid of Ling Han's medicinal pills, even a stupid swine could rise to the heavens, let alone they who were geniuses. The army numbered 1 million people. In terms of North Region's population, the amount wasn't much. But with the army, it was quality rather than quantity that counted. The West Region's martial arts level was higher than the North Region's, so what use would it be to bring a large amount of normal soldiers? Amongst the army of 1 million, there were 100,000 people who reached beyond the spiritual ocean tier, with 100 people as a small unit, 1,000 people as a medium unit, and 10,000 people as an array. This was the true elite that cultivated Purple Moon Emperor Court's combined attack formation, which could increase battle prowess extremely greatly. The remaining 900,000 people were much worse and barely counted as battle power, but there were many trifling matters that shouldn't be done by the elites, right? Report. When there was still 3 days' journey before the region wall, a scout brought information to report. Speak, Ling Han said indifferently. Your Majesty, the West region is already prepared, gathering soldiers by the region barrier. A rough estimate is over 100,000, each one of them elites, the scout said. Ling Han nodded. The scout's strength was limited, and he obviously couldn't distinguish between the spiritual pedestal tier, the heaven tier, and the spiritual infant tier. However, the West region united so fast and gathered at the region wall, showing a stance of being ready to fight a decisive battle. This was rather contrary to his expectations. After all, the forces of a region were too varied. Unlike his word of command that the entire region would obey, the West region's deity transformation tier forces were in the tens, and these forces alone would take several months' time reaching a consensus. In addition to certain wrangle on the problem of the number of experts each family dispatched, no one wanted to overdraw their own family's strength. For them to be combat-ready so quickly somewhat shocked Ling Han. Your Majesty, this subordinate is willing to take the vanguard. Yuan Cheng, he requested. Over so many days, he polished and solidified spiritual infant tier immensely, and broke through to the deity transformation tier more than 10 days ago, making him full of confidence. If he were to cultivate on his own, it would take at least 5 years more for him to reach the deity transformation tier, but following an alchemy emperor, and taking medicine every day, it would be strange not to have such progression. The rock spirit cried out, pounding its chest loudly, also asking to fight. Compared to the others, the rock spirit's improvement was even faster because it had no bottlenecks, and didn't face the necessity of compacting its tier. Gnawing on the essence of stone inside the Black Tower each month, its tier leapt up and up. Now, it had already advanced into the Heaven tier. The Shattering Void tier was too hard to reach, so it probably had to gnaw on rocks for 1 to 2 more years before it could advance to humanity's peak. Qian Wu Yong, Hu Fengyue, and the others were also itching to have a go. In the years at the Winter Moon sect, they only advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier, but after joining the army, they improved one more step in a short amount of time and reached the Flower Blossom tier, obviously boosting their confidence greatly. Yu Kai Yu seemed a lot more mature and sat quietly by the side, but his eyes also bloomed with the desire for battle. Had advanced into the Flower Blossom tier and also had extraordinary strength. This time, they marched westward with almost all their forces, so the elites of various large sects were also mobilized with no lack of the spiritual infant tier elites. But these old guys were much more low-key. They knew very well that the West region's martial arts level was above the North region's. It was fine if the other side didn't come fight them, but now, they were the ones actually initiating the attack. If it weren't for Ling Han's command, having no choice, they'd really want to turn to their heels. Ling Han smiled as he waved his hand, and said, "First let's make it to the region barrier to see how many experts exactly the West region has dispatched." 100,000 troops went ahead of the rest and arrived at the region barrier 2 days later. As expected, a field of military tents was in front, and countless people could be seen entering and exiting. Although there was no military discipline exhibited by them at all, each and every one was at least in the spiritual pedestal tier. A single soldier's strength was extremely formidable. With the arrival of such a large army, the West region obviously immediately reacted as everyone came out from their military tents and stood unorganized. Countless small groups could be clearly seen. Apparently, each small group was from one force, and had no intention at all of teaming up with the others. It was very normal. While they were people from one region, it was precisely because they were from one region that there was great enmity between them. The forces outside the region couldn't possibly start a feud, and all strife was internal strife. At this moment, 5 youngsters walked out from the West region's camp, each one of them of peerless talent and with an invincible spirit. Among them were Su Xiaofan, Jia Ming, and Dong Linger. Chapter 772. Interception. The barrier wall was invisible, and it was just like air if it wasn't touched, so Ling Han's eyesight obviously wasn't affected. Su Xiaofan, Dong Linger, Jia Ming, the 5 great sects' younger generation of geniuses who were almost qualified to rival the strongest ones of the current age. The other party had a total of 5 people, standing alongside each other equally, and what did this show? Those 2 that weren't recognized by him were definitely Small Sword Emperor, Zhang Mo, and the Son of Lightning. These 2 people were easy to recognize. Small Sword Emperor carried an unadorned long sword on his back and the Son of Lightning was bound by Cyan Lightning, and as his gaze swept by, it was like a thunderbolt, extremely terrifying. Although the Son of Lightning was more renowned, Ling Han was more interested in Small Sword Emperor, who was rumored to have formed Sword Heart. Despite being separated by the region barrier, Ling Han could still feel that intense sword intent on Small Sword Emperor, as if even the region barrier could be torn open. Ling Han suddenly came to a realization. No wonder the West region could unite so quickly. It was the 5 great sects' handiwork. Ling Han, you really are daring to the extreme, establishing a nation. Su Xiaofan said coldly. He held the absolute saber in hand, his eyes each had a saber shape, and his presence and spirit were reserved, seeming a lot more powerful. Ling Han said indifferently, "If I don't establish a nation, how could we escape from the murderous scheme of the 5 sects?" He now openly stood against the 5 great sects, and obviously had no more qualms. Crazy ravings. Dong Linger reproved. She was beautiful and striking, not inferior to Azure Phoenix Divine Empress. She wore a long dress, her skin was white like snow, and her features were as pretty as a painting. She was unmatched in beauty. "Those aren't ravings, you guys clearly know in your hearts." Ling Han snorted. Jia Ming took one step forward and said, "I knew long ago that you'd definitely choose the West region pushovers, so the 5 of us kept watch here. Don't you think about advancing the slightest bit further? Might as well tell you, the East region is immediately dispatching soldiers to attack the North region to seize your home." As the West region's powerful figures listened, they couldn't help but reveal an annoyed look. They were calling them pushovers. They didn't dare to say anything, because the 5 great sects were too strong, and the 5 people here represented the strongest battle power amongst the younger generation. Even they could only bow to them. Ling Han was calm and unhurried. The imperial city had Yi Shuang keeping watch, so nothing would go wrong. Moreover, as long as they didn't establish a nation, it didn't matter that East region attacked, for they could only take the territory and not rob him of the power of the nation world, and it'd be fine to just reclaim it in the future. He said, "Why's there only the 5 of you? Did the experts of the 5 great sects all die?" Jia Ming couldn't help but snort, and said, "With the 5 of us together, is there anyone below the Shattering Void tier that can't be killed?" Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "The 5 great sects probably can't draw out Shattering Void tier elites. I suppose Purple Moon Emperor Court's 8 kings have all come into the world, restraining all your Shattering Void tier warriors." The expressions of the 5 changed. It was just like Ling Han said, Purple Moon Emperor's court was now extremely powerful, and although there were only 8 Shattering Void tier elites in the latter's ranks, each one was at the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier and harnessed the power of laws, so one of them was easily capable of going against more than 10 opponents on similar level. Even though the 5 great sects were forced to awaken every single ancient almighty in advance, 100 Shattering Void tier elites still weren't enough to slow down the pace of advancement of the 8 kings. Now that Purple Moon Emperor's court's territory was becoming larger and larger and they gained more subjects, as a king's court, the more terrifying the blessing of the power of the nation they had become. It was tantamount to nourishing their strength through fighting, and now the 8 kings were truly powerful to the point of being unstoppable. Otherwise, drawing out any Shattering Void tier elite to suppress the so-called Great Ling Empire would be no effort at all. "Humph, you can hardly fend for yourself, and you still have the leisure to be concerned about others?" the Son of Lightning said. Thunder was drawn the moment he spoke, turning into a sea of dark clouds rolling in the sky intertwined with azure lightning. Ling Han unleashed the Revere Life Sword, and said, "All right, the squabble is over, let's cross swords." He pushed open the barrier wall. "Kill!" Great Ling Empire's elite army yelled. Pang, pang, pang. The rock spirit was the first to charge out. Hunyo rode on its shoulders, looking like she couldn't contain her excitement. Inside her heart hid a fierce tiger that thirsted for slaughter and blood, and the scene of such a great battle was most suited for her. The little girl flashed and turned into lightning, pang, 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 and the West region's army immediately suffered great casualties. Her battle prowess shockingly reached the heaven tier, which was obviously equal to being invincible in the West region, where the deity transformation tier was the apex. The little girl bathed in blood and had already become a demon, with her eyes shooting out lightning. With a sweep of a glance, a large field of elites were immediately turned into ashes. The Son of Lightning couldn't help but be greatly intrigued, and said, "I'll handle her." He also turned into lightning and charged towards Hunyo. As he glared with his eyes, 2 exceptional treasured swords rushed out and slashed towards Hunyo. Nyo's wind and fire fist. Hunyo roared, and carried out a fierce battle with the Son of Lightning. Ling Han only needed to let the spiritual infant tier elites pass through, since the others wouldn't be affected by the region barrier. He held the Revere Life Sword in hand and said, "You 4 attack together." In reality, no one could block these 4 except for him. Su Xiaofan smiled sarcastically and said, "Against you, do the 4 of us need to join hands?" He didn't awaken the Absolute Saber, because once the Absolute Saber was awoken, the sword in Ling Han's hand would definitely also wake up, and no one would be able to kill Ling Han then. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "So much self-confidence. Then I'll speak no more. Bring it on." Su Xiaofan swung his saber as he charged over. He didn't awaken the absolute saber, but the saber was still all-conquering. With a slash of the saber, even Ling Han's physique couldn't completely withstand it. This saber's sharpness had already surpassed the level of 10th tier spirit tools. Wang, a strange feeling shrouded Ling Han, making him feel unable to swing his sword. Saber heart. Ling Han was deeply moved inside. He and Su Xiaofan came to grips a total of 2 times. The first time was the clash of strength, but Su Xiaofan's grasp of the saber heart definitely wasn't this strong. At least, it couldn't influence him. The second time didn't count, since it was simply the clash between the absolute saber and the revere life sword, and saber heart wasn't of any use at all. But this time, Su Xiaofan's grasp of the saber heart improved even more, and could even affect him. Ling Han adhered strictly to his heart and operated the revere life sword with his left hand, slashing towards Su Xiaofan. Ding, ding, ding. The two of them exchanged blows, releasing ceaseless rays of light. Su Xiaofan became stronger again, not only having initial mastery of saber heart, but also having improved greatly in all aspects. His was definitely a high-level heaven tier's battle prowess. Ling Han was unafraid, executing the desolate hell sword with the revere life sword in the right hand while operating the earth overturning seal with the left hand, spreading out golden light. This could also pose a great threat to Su Xiaofan, who, after all, wasn't a physical cultivator. However, Ling Han was still no match for him. Su Xiaofan already crossed into the heaven tier. This guy who could cultivate casually and view bottlenecks as non-existent was kick-ass as expected, improving surprisingly fast. He was only in the first layer of the heaven tier, but his battle prowess reached heaven tier 10 stars, crossing 9 stars of battle prowess too terrifying. It was only a few dozen moves before Ling Han's body had many wounds, but compared to his physique's toughness and recovery ability, it was no big deal, looking like he was hurt, but was not really. At this moment, Ling Han, however, felt chills all over his body, sensing a great imminent danger. Chapter 773. A Trump Card of the Shattering Void Tier. Ling Han turned abruptly and saw Dong Linger holding a scroll in her hand. It was this thing that made him feel extreme chills and pins and needles. Was this a Shattering Void Tier's law decree? Other than that, Ling Han couldn't think of anything that could make him feel such a strong sense of danger. The Shattering Void Tier, the strongest in the world, overwhelming heaven tier elites not just by a tiny bit. Su Xiaofan also realized it, and said discontentedly, I can kill him. The seniors have said that the only mission on this trip is to kill this person. Dong Linger said coldly, and didn't give Su Xiaofan face. She opened the scroll slowly, and instantly, a terrifyingly powerful presence swept by, making everyone anxious. The Shattering Void Tier, beings at humanity's peak. Even a shred of their aura could cause the skies to turn pale. Inside the scroll, white divine light rose constantly, and though Dong Linger was the one who'd opened it, it was as if she was non-existent and only that scroll remained in the world, conveying the heaven's decree. It was definitely a Shattering Void Tier elite's law decree. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The 5 great sects were really even willing to take out such a law decree. After all, it wasn't just the matter of a Shattering Void Tier expending their cultivation to write it down just how precious were the materials? If it weren't a Shattering Void Tier beast skin, how could it withstand a Shattering Void Tier's will? If it weren't a Shattering Void Tier being's blood essence, how could it possibly leave a mark on such a beast skin? How many Shattering Void Tier beasts were there in the world? Therefore the 5 great sects really buckled down. Su Xiaofan snorted, but said no more. His personal plans obviously couldn't override the sect's interests, even if he was absolute Saber sect's most exceptional genius in 10,000 years, the one and only. When the scroll fully unfurled, white light intertwined and formed a phoenix, with wings 300 meters long, emitting an all-powerful presence. The Shattering Void Tier. As Dong Linger pointed with her index and middle finger, the phoenix cried out resoundingly and fluttered its wings. Even the blue skies were about to collapse as it was diving extremely rapidly towards Ling Han. A Shattering Void Tier attack. Did a deity transformation tier warrior qualify to resist it? Not to mention a deity transformation tier, even a heaven-defying heaven tier elite wouldn't. just like how it was impossible to rival a flower blossom tier opponent no matter how strong a spiritual pedestal tier elite weighs it was insurmountable. But at this moment, the temperature of the air dropped rapidly as everyone felt like they were falling into an ice cave, trembling all over involuntarily, instantly losing their fighting spirit and simply wanting to hold their arms to escape the cold. With a dragon's cry, an entirely icy white true dragon appeared, waving its claws fiercely at the phoenix. Hong! The two divine beasts exchanged blows, the momentum shaking the skies. Theoretically, true phoenixes definitely wouldn't lose to true dragons, but true dragons were relatively stronger, so true dragons were regarded as the divine realm's standard measure of power. But the problem was that neither of two were true divine beasts. One was formed by a formation, while the other was formed by a law decree. Pang, in an exchange of blows, the phoenix was immediately sent flying, not enduring a single exchange. Ling Han smiled proudly. He'd already expected such a result. Where did the attacks of a law decree come from? Martial artists branded their martial intent onto talisman paper with their own blood essence, which, unfolded, could form attacks, no different from spirit talismans. In this way, the power of law decrees was limited by 2 points. First, the martial artist's strength, and second, the talisman paper's quality. The talisman paper used for Shattering Void Tier's law decree would definitely be Shattering Void Tier's beast's skin, and if the beast was only in the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void Tier, then it would be impossible to withstand martial intent even 1 layer higher. Similarly, even if the talisman paper was of the 9th layer of the Shattering Void Tier, but the creator only was at the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void Tier, then the law decree created would have at most power of the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void Tier. A 2-way restriction. Decided 2-way. There were pitifully little Shattering Void Tier beasts to begin with, so where could a high-level one be slaughtered so that you can get beast skin? Such a thing was a most valuable treasure that could be used to refine high-level defensive gear, and creating a law decree was really too wasteful. Besides, writing a law decree required one's own blood essence, which was a type of great expense for Shattering Void Tier elites. Who would be willing to do it? Thus, Ling Han estimated that the law decree's power wouldn't surpass Shattering Void Tier 5 stars, and as he'd expected, the Phoenix's attack was knocked back by the Ice Dragon. It probably only had Shattering Void Tier 2 to 3 stars of battle prowess. What? Su Xiaofan and other 4 all cried out in surprise. That was a Shattering Void Tier elite's personally refined law decree. How could it be not even withstand 1 blow? That Ice Dragon. They were all shocked. With their judgment, they could obviously see that it was a formation, and the biggest difference between formations and law decrees was that law decrees would naturally become a piece of waste paper as the Shattering Void Tier's blood essence was all burned out after 1 use. But formations were different as long as heaven and earth was still present. The formation could absorb spirit chi continuously, its power not decreasing. If the law decree was powerful enough, then it could destroy the formation in 1 vigorous effort, and it would be useless to have strength that didn't run out, but the key was that the formation now was the stronger one. What else could be done then? Su Xiaofan brandished the absolute saber, and said, Ling Han, no one used their trump card of Shattering Void Tier, I'll fight with you. Ling Han shook his head and said, Sorry, it's a war now, not the time to contest with personal strength. He spurred the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation towards the 4 great geniuses. Damn it! Su Xiaofan yelled angrily, and could only awaken the absolute saber without any other choice. A terrifying supreme presence overflowed as the absolute saber floated in the sky, illuminating the blue skies. Once the absolute saber was awoken, the Revere Life Sword also operated on its own and confronted the absolute saber. Now with the Shattering Void Tier battle prowess on both sides equal in number, the absolute saber and the Revere Life Sword were old opponents, hard to tell which was the better, but the Ice Dragon was definitely stronger than the Phoenix, and law decrees existed limited in time. Once exhausted, the West Region's coalition army would undoubtedly be killed. Su Xiaofan and the other great geniuses' expressions changed. Who could have expected that Ling Han would possess battle prowess of the Shattering Void Tier in such a short amount of time? Retreat, it was a mistaken evaluation. Shattering Void Tier elites must personally take charge. Yes, at least those possessing battle prowess of Shattering Void Tier 5 stars. The 4 great geniuses immediately gave up the fight, and retreated swiftly with the absolute saber and the Shattering Void Tier law decree as protection. Ling Han chased for a while and gave up. The focus now was to take the West region. As for the old scores with Su Xiaofan and the others, that could be settled in the future. As long as he advanced into the heaven tier, which one of them could rival him? When he advanced into the shattering void tier, he would also be invincible. When he returned, he saw that the son of lightning had already run. Hunyo didn't lose out and showed her terrifying strength of the greatest genius in the world. In the battle, the West Region's coalition army was completely defeated and dispersed, with several deity transformation tier elites being killed and high-end battle power being weakened greatly. The rock spirit remained to assist the army on its continuous expedition, while Ling Han, Hunyo, Zhu Xian'er, and the others returned to the North region. The East region invaded, though it could be guaranteed that the imperial city wouldn't be lost. Other cities falling into the enemy's hands would affect the nation's fortune after all. They set out on the path of return. On the third day, a man appeared in the middle of the road with a table placed in front of him. He sat on an imperial tutor's chair and was sipping tea, looking to be completely at ease. Chapter 774. Drink tea first, then kill people. In such desolate wilderness, a tea-drinking man unexpectedly appeared, completely relaxed. It was abnormal no matter how one looked at it. Ling Han and the others stopped in their tracks and looked towards that person. He was a man gentle like jade, looked to be in the 30s, filled with a manly charm, and with a full head of black hair that draped over his shoulders, seeming somewhat wanton and unrestrained. This person obviously also saw Ling Han. He put down his teacup and said, "Tea is really such a good thing, cultivating one's mind and illuminating one's heart. This is sitting in the middle of the road. Are you planning to serve me tea?" Ling Han said with a smile, and walked over with large strides. The man took out a cup from the tea tray and filled it up, then said, "Why not?" Ling Han pulled out a chair and sat down face to face with that man. He lifted the cup to smell it and said, "It indeed is good tea." That man cracked a smile and said, "It's dragon's birth tea, which according to legends grew bathing in the reign of true dragons, cultivated once in 100 years. Whether it really bathed in the reign of true dragons is unknown, but the preciousness of it is not to be doubted. The tea's fragrance overflows in the mouth, lingering for a long time." "Thanks." Ling Han took a sip, and his brows relaxed involuntarily. He should also plant this kind of good tea inside the Black Tower. "Please enjoy." That man extended his hand, making an inviting gesture. Ling Han took a few sips, placed the teacup down and said, "I haven't asked what this lord's distinguished name is." That man smiled faintly and said, "I'm called Corpse Boss." "Pooh." Ling Han almost spurted out a mouthful of tea. He'd thought of many possibilities, but didn't associate the man with the 1,000 Corpse sect. No matter whether it was Rong Huan Xian, Corpse 2, or the 9th Underworld King, all of them had corpse chi, but in front of their eyes, the cultured and refined man like an erudite scholar really couldn't be associated with the 1,000 Corpse sect. According to what Corpse 2, Corpse Boss was more perfect than he was. It really was perfect to the point that he didn't seem like a corpse returning to life. The marks of old age could still be seen on Corpse 2's body, but Corpse Boss truly shed off the old skin and obtained new life. "How truly unexpected," Ling Han said sincerely. Hearing Corpse Boss's name, one think of a person with furrowed brows and blazing eyes, looking all murderous. Truly a huge gap from the one before their eyes. Corpse Boss smiled faintly and said, "I very rarely kill people, but facing those worthy of my intervention, I'll always treat them to tea." "Does this count as the beheading tea one?" Ling Han said. "You could say so." Corpse Boss nodded. "Can we chat before it's finished?" "Of course." "Please. Please." The two completely didn't seem like enemies, talking cheerfully and humorously. Corpse Boss was well-read and could talk volubly no matter what topic they were on, while Ling Han wasn't to be outdone, either. He lived 200 years in the previous lifetime, and obviously read extensively, so very few could rival his abundance of knowledge. As they talked and drank, the pot of tea was soon finished. After the two drank all the tea inside their cups, they suddenly stopped speaking. Corpse Boss slowly stored away the teacups inside a spatial spirit tool, while Ling Han stood up so that Corpse Boss could also store the table and chair at the same time. "If you can block 10 of my moves, I'll let you go once," Corpse Boss said. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless. He couldn't see through Corpse Boss's cultivation at all. According to what Corpse 2 had said, Corpse Boss had always been cultivating in the pond of the underworld and was extremely like to have reached the Shattering Void tier before he left. If Corpse Boss was at the Shattering Void tier, then he really could strike the firmament and destroy the depth of hell, strikingly powerful. 10 moves. If Ling Han resisted with his own battle prowess, it would probably be extremely difficult. Ling Han unleashed the Revere Life Sword, prepared for battle. Corpse Boss very casually swatted his hand at Ling Han. Hong, the world dimmed as a large hand appeared out of thin air, pressing towards Ling Han. Nothing fancy, it was just an extremely simple palm attack. However, the palm's power shockingly reached the peak stage of the heaven tier. Ling Han greeted it with his sword, but was immediately sent flying, trembling all over and almost spurting out blood. It was extremely shocking. His physique clearly reached the toughness of 9th tier rare metal, but his internal organs were still shocked under the attack as if overturning seas and rivers, being extremely hard to bear. The second move. Corpse Boss swung his palm. The power increased a whole lot unimaginably, and although it hadn't reached the Shattering Void tier, it really wasn't far from it. This guy was undoubtedly at the Shattering Void tier. 10 moves, with each move increasing in battle prowess. On the third move, the power would probably reach the Shattering Void tier. Ling Han took another hit, and his entire person was smacked into a sheet of paper, becoming extremely flat. However, such a terrifying attack was neutralized in half, and the remaining half he could completely take on with his physique. Coupling hardness with softness? Corpse Boss revealed an astounded expression. I've never expected your physical arts to reach such a high standard. But this is only the second move. He swung his right hand again, throwing out the third palm. This time, it really reached the Shattering Void tier. Even the skies trembled and the earth split, groaning soundlessly under the Shattering Void tier's battle prowess. Ling Han had no more hesitation and swung his right hand, spreading out 108 short swords, forming the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Pang! The large hand hit, but was forcibly stopped as an ice dragon appeared, blocking the palm. Corpse 2 looked surprised again. You really surprise people. You're actually a formation master as well? This person was a little more than 20, but he not only had amazing attainments in martial arts, but also had an identity of a heaven-grade alchemist. Now, he even unleashed a 10th tier formation. How truly incredible. How could one person display such accomplishments? Corpse 2 said that you might be some Shattering Void tier's reincarnation with the soul of the previous lifetime. Being able to use the realm power. Seems somewhat reasonable, Corpse Boss said. People were limited by time, and even if Ling Han started to study the 3 Daos meticulously once he was born, 20 years' time was by no means enough to get any single one to the extreme, let alone 3 Daos together. Except for a Shattering Void tier elite's reincarnation, there was no second kind of possibility. But reincarnation and rebirth. This was completely unheard of. Take him and Corpse 2 as examples. Although they were still with the bodies they had several 10,000 years ago, their souls had not a bit of relationship with their previous one. The body was indeed the same, but could it still count as the previous life's continuance? The spirit's reincarnation? Inconceivable. It could shock the entire world if word were to spread. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "There are 7 more moves." Corpse Boss's expression was stern as he raised his right hand in front of his chest and condensed a shocking light ray in his palm with veined pattern surfacing, emitting an ancient presence. Was this his previous life's martial intent? Ling Han was somewhat gloomy. He clearly knew that Corpse Boss was accumulating power for an ultimate move, yet he could only stare blankly. He pondered and decided that he couldn't be so passive, unleashing Sunset Bow. Blocking 10 moves was what the deal was, but there was no mention that he could only take the beating. He drew the bow, mounted an arrow, and activated the Eye of Truth, searching for Corpse Boss's weakness. Chapter 775. A Divine Being's Skeletal Hand. Ling Han shockingly discovered that there wasn't a trace of any weakness on Corpse Boss. How was that possible? There were lees in every wine, and even the world's finest defensive arts definitely wouldn't be without a trace of a weakness. It was unrealistic. But now, a truly perfect being appeared. From the information fed back by the Eye of Truth, his arrow would be useless no matter which direction it was shot in. Ling Han immediately realized that it wasn't Corpse Boss who had no weak points, but that his own strength was too weak. Shattering Void Tier elites were too powerful to the point that even if they didn't move, their static defense was almost flawless, and it wouldn't matter no matter how much Heaven Tier elites attacked. At least Ling Han alone couldn't break through it. This was the gap in tier. Ling Han stood at the peak of martial arts in his previous life, but it was only the Heaven Tier, and Shattering Void Tier elites were also extremely mysterious existences to him. And now, he was going to go against such a being. Fortunately, there was still Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Ling Han operated his strength to the extreme, and if even the Ice Dragon couldn't rival Corpse Boss, he would have to consider hiding in the Black Tower or using up Black Tower's one-time power boost, though a great pity, it was better than dying here. Corpse Boss attacked, throwing out a palm, and countless large stars instantly fell from the sky as if a meteor shower was raining down on Ling Han. These weren't large stars, but something that used origin power as cores, gathering spirit chi, and under the blessing of martial intent, they were heavier than stars, so it wasn't excessive to call them large stars that rained down cluster after cluster. This was an ultimate move unleashed by a Shattering Void Tier elite was ineffably terrifying. The Ice Dragon roared, crying out repeatedly as it charged towards the sky. Instantly, the sky burst forth with shocking light rays, and even Ling Han couldn't help but lower his head, not daring to stare at it. He was within the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, which was also a powerful defense, enough to resist against the impact of Shattering Void Tier 5 stars. Corpse Boss made multiple snatching movements with both hands. Countless large stars continued to fall, flickering, and even the sun's radiance was completely concealed. The Ice Dragon was extremely formidable. It possessed battle prowess of the Shattering Void Tier 7 stars, even being undying. Even if it was knocked apart, it wouldn't matter, for with the accumulation of spirit chi, it could immediately recover. Its root lay in the formation, and with the formation unbroken and there being no lack of spirit chi, it could exist forever. Corpse Boss was very strong, but not superior to battle prowess of Shattering Void Tier 5 stars. Not only could he not deal with the formation, he was even hunted down by the Ice Dragon. If it weren't for his extremely formidable physique, he might have been instantly killed. He stopped and muttered, "One more move." Ling Han was assured within. Although he completely couldn't see through a Shattering Void Tier elite strength, he could still make a judgment based on the confrontation between the Ice Dragon and Corpse Boss. Corpse Boss's strength was roughly Shattering Void Tier 4 stars, which was also when he released an ultimate move. Unfortunately, Ling Han only relied on the Ice Dragon's strength, or else it would be even possible for him to oppress Corpse Boss. After all, formations couldn't grow legs to carry out a pursuit and attack. The Ice Dragon could at most move in the range of the formation, and would disappear when leaving it, for it was created by the formation. There was one more move. Did Corpse Boss have an even stronger ultimate move? Corpse Boss spread open his right hand, and a crystal-shaped skeletal hand appeared. A skeletal hand should look terrifying and ghastly, but this crystal skeletal hand seemed like the most exquisite piece of art, without any ghastly feel to it and instead full of grandeur. But examining closely, one would see that there were countless veined patterns on the skeletal hand, so numerous that they were uncountable. Ling Han was shocked within and said, "Could you also have cut this off your own body in your previous life?" Corpse 2's bone mallet was made from his own femur. For a being that reached such a tier, even severed limbs could regenerate, but they couldn't regrow rapidly the way Ling Han's did. Using one's own bone as a spirit tool would definitely be the most comfortable more than using a spirit tool nourished by oneself. Corpse Boss shook his head and said, "No, this hand is certainly something obtained in my previous life, but it's definitely not from my own body. According to my many years of research and conjectures, it might be a divine being's hand." What? Ling Han was shocked. A divine being's hand. Wait, didn't this realm not allow divine spirit elites to appear? No, it was just a severed hand, at most seen as a divine tool. Even Black Tower, Heaven Transformation Bowl, and Bottle of Curse could exist, so why couldn't a divine being's hand? The key was what sort of power it could unleash. Is it strong? Ling Han said with a smile. The more dangerous the moment, the more relaxed his mind was. Very strong, Corpse Boss said solemnly. It can kill normal Shattering Void Tier elites, and if not for the realm power suppression, it can be even stronger. Then I shall see, Ling Han said, brandishing the Revere Life Sword, which also became stronger when encountering a strong opponent. He also took out the Heaven Transformation Bowl. Could the skeletal hand be absorbed and refined into a few drops of divine being's bone marrow? Corpse Boss grasped the crystal skeletal hand, and Wang, the veined patterns lit up. Quang, the sky immediately echoed with a clap of thunder. Sensed by the heaven and earth, the dark clouds rolled, gathering densely above Corpse Boss as if a heavenly tribulation was going to descend to kill him. That crystal skeletal hand was too powerful, it threatened the existence of this realm. The heavenly Tao was also startled, and prepared to intervene at any time, opening a spatial fissure to expel it. Ling Han had seen the look of the heaven and earth unleashing its might. In Zi Shuexian's memories, those as powerful as divine beings were immediately devoured and expelled once they erupted with power not belonging to this realm. However, the dark clouds were rolling, but lightning never struck down, and no spatial fissure opened up. Apparently, the crystal skeletal hand was strong, but not strong to the point of making heaven and earth expel it. What a headache! Ling Han unleashed the heaven transformation bowl, and Wang, the treasured bowl, lit up and began to absorb everything around it unrestrainedly. Even normal rocks weren't let off, yet it had no way to fend against that crystal skeletal hand. Apparently, the heaven transformation bowl couldn't deal with it. The levels of the two things were about the same, so heaven transformation bowl couldn't do it. Ling Han retrieved the heaven transformation bowl, and fully activated the Revere Life Sword. Even though he carved out a 10th tier formation, he still had a hard time grasping the formations on the Revere Life Sword. Till now, he still only activated 7 formation patterns, yet the formation patterns on it reached the number of over 10,000. Sensing the threat posed by the crystal skeletal hand, the Revere Life Sword began to awaken on its own. Its killing intent spread out, influencing the air to spiral on its own. Inside the vortex, there was a gaseous sword, pitifully small, yet it could make shattering void tier elites feel fear when they saw it. Corpse Boss's eyes instinctively burst with a chilling glare as he said, "Your sword is remarkable. I seem to have some memory of it, but I can't remember." Would shattering void tier beings forget things? Of course it was impossible. Then what he meant by being unable to remember was definitely a memory from his previous life. After all, it was an old corpse that had a newly birthed soul, which could be seen as a completely different being. But for Revere Life Sword to stimulate Corpse Boss's memory from the previous life, that was even more terrifying. How deeply engraved did the memory have to be for it to connect two souls through several hundred thousands of years? It was probably deeply engraved in his bones. Chapter 776. Plunder. What Ling Han was shocked with was not that Corpse Boss's body could remember an entire formation over several hundred thousand of years, but with Ma Duo Bao, who created the Revere Life Sword. The strength of this person was absolutely shocking. To be able to engrave the memory of a formation deep into an elite's bones, in harsher words, wasn't that fear deep to the bones? Then, how terrifying was Ma Duo Bao, who was able to create the formation? The world's #1 formation master, entirely worthy of such a title. No wonder he could stand as #1 above the rest on the martial arts stone, calling himself #1 and looking down on the world. It indeed wasn't big talk, but he was truly powerful. However, what sort of formation was it exactly? Hong, the crystal skeletal hand, was completely activated and turned into a slim hand with blood and flesh. Even if it was only a hand, it was charming, and had definitely belonged to an exceptional celestial fairy. However, the delicate hand turned into the size of a lofty mountain, smashing towards Ling Han. Nothing fancy, only the terrifying display of martial intent, emitting an arrogant and domineering presence. "Nothing can block it, I'll shatter it all." It seemed to say something like that. The Revere Life Sword also blossomed with dazzling light as over 10,000 veined patterns all lit up, and Xiao, it slipped out of Ling Han's hand and rose into the air on its own, standing off against the delicate hand. The two clashed, and the sword struck the palm, bursting forth with world-dazzling light, once again blinding people. After the dazzling light, Revere Life Sword and the lily-white hand fought fiercely, exchanging blows constantly and bursting forth with terrifyingly powerful chi. Ling Han hurriedly summoned everyone over and guarded them with Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, or else, if they were struck once, they'd definitely be smashed to pieces. Corpse Boss shook his head, stopped the battle on his own accord, retrieved the crystal skeletal hand, and said, 10 moves. I can't kill you. Ling Han's battle spirit was ablaze, and he said, Brother Corpse, I look forward to fighting with you the next time, truly coming to grips. Corpse Boss was refined and cultured, wearing a smile on his face, and had no sign of frustration, appearing greatly generous in spirit. He said, "Then you'd better cultivate faster. The stage of the Shattering Void tier isn't that easy to reach. I only crossed over it without hindrance because of my former life, or else, it's extremely, extremely difficult." Even he used two extremelies, so it was clear that humanity's peak indeed wasn't easy to reach. This time, I'm indebted to Brother Corpse for treating me to great tea. Next time I'll treat you to good wine, Ling Han said with a smile. Corpse Boss couldn't help but smile and said, "Although I don't drink wine, I'm willing to make an exception for you." "Please. Please." Corpse Boss turned his body and took a step, appearing several miles out. To be so courteous after a life-and-death battle, it was a first for Ling Han. However, Corpse Boss indeed had a remarkable bearing, which gave him a favorable impression and desire to be his friend. However, he is after all one of 1,000 corpse sects, and in the future, I'll inevitably fight against the 1,000 corpse sect, and it might really be a fight to the death. Ling Han sighed deeply. Hong! An astonishing battle shockwave suddenly came from afar. The stars in the sky shattered continuously, and even a large cluster of stars could be seen falling down in the daytime, being obstructed by the astral winds, burning, and turning into meteorites. It was a battle of the Shattering Void tier, and it just happened to be in the direction Corpse Boss was headed. Did he encounter a formidable enemy? Ling Han wasn't worried. Shattering Void tier elite speeds were about the same, so if one side wanted to run, they could completely escape, which was the reason why Shattering Void tier elites were almost undying. If I couldn't win, I'd just run, and what could you do? Unless it was someone who cultivated a mystical power like Thunderclap Ninth Heaven. Then no one could catch up when running, and no one could escape when chasing. However, if a Shattering Void tier elite was willing to ignite his life essence, they could still erupt with high speeds, which was still unresolvable. The great fight in the distance didn't continue for long and soon calmed down, but it was only an instant before a terrifying oppressive pressure assaulted them, making people's skin crack, which was extremely hard to bear. A red-haired girl appeared in the distance with yellowish-pink wings, which spread out over 3,000 meters, but they were shrinking rapidly, and in the time of breath, the wings were completely gone. Yi shuang shuang. The girl held a crystal-shaped skeletal hand in her hand, playing with it absorbedly. "Hey!" Ling Han shouted. "Io, who is it scared this lady?" Yi shuang shuang put away the crystal skeletal hand in a hurry. When she saw Ling Han and the others, she couldn't help but be puzzled, and said to herself, "Strange, this lady was clearly walking back. Why'd she bump into these guys?" Ling Han pointed out, "You walked in the wrong direction. The Imperial City is the other way." "Hee, thanks for reminder. Later." Yi shuang shuang turned to leave. "Wait!" Ling Han shouted in a hurry to stop her. "Weren't you keeping watch over the Imperial City? Why did you run over here?" Yi shuang shuang shrugged and said, "Sensed a great battle here from the Imperial City, so I came here to watch the fun." Ling Han rolled his eyes and said, "Not just watch the fun, is it, but also steal someone else's things." This woman had apparently arrived long ago, but didn't intervene all along, yet waited till after Corpse Boss left to catch up to him and snatch the crystal skeletal hand. One couldn't help but say that this woman was too powerful. The might released by the crystal skeletal hand was so terrifying, but she still forcibly suppressed it. Poor Corpse Boss had to be very gloomy, right? However, it was unfortunate for him to meet a being from the divine realm. She wasn't ordinarily strong even with her strength suppressed, at least not what the current him could rival. Perhaps it took the Lunar King, and even elites like Ma Duo Bao, to counter her. Yi shuang shuang giggled and said, "You don't know, this skeletal hand is extremely likely to be from a heavenly body tier powerhouse, and if the essence within could be extracted, this lady might be able to restore all her vigor." "What heavenly body tier? And, the Imperial City is that far from here you can still sense it?" Ling Han questioned closely. "TSK, only separated by such tiny distance, it'd be strange if this lady couldn't sense it. This realm's rules are too simple. This lady is absolutely like an almighty god here." Yi shuang shuang said disdainfully. "Heavenly body tier, is this a divine being's tier?" Ling Han asked. He could conclude that divine being also had relative superiority, but he didn't know how it was divided. Hi, you're so annoying, a mere deity transformation tier warrior concerned about the matters of the divine realm, Yi Shuang said with disdain. Ling Han gave a ha and said, believe it or not, I'll advance into the shattering void tier within 10 years, and breaking into the divine realm is also just around the corner. Seemingly awed by Ling Han's heroic spirit, Yi Shuang was taken aback shortly, then said, all right, then this lady will do a good deed and educate you in advance, but after you know, you'd better not be shocked and unable to recover. Tisk, am I such a weak-willed person? Ling Han obviously wouldn't believe it. Don't be so sure. Yi Shuang played with a skeletal hand, and said, divine beings are separated into 5 large tiers: mountain river, sun moon, heavenly body, eternal river, and Genesis. But every large tier isn't divided into 9 layers, instead there are only 4 small tiers, which are low extreme, medium extreme, high extreme, and consummate. Not to mention the large levels, the strength gaps between the small levels are as large as the sky. You're now in the deity transformation tier, yet you can fight the heaven tier, crossing 1 large tier, and can be called a genius in the mortal realm, but after advancing into the divine tier, even crossing 1 small tier is difficult. Chapter 777. Divine Realms Geniuses. Hearing those words, Ling Han really was somewhat shocked. He could win against an opponent by crossing an entire large tier, but despite such endowments and freakishness, once at the divine level, it was actually hard to cross even 1 small tier. You're shocked, right? Yi Shuang snickered. It's precisely because every small tier is hard to cross that even small extreme, medium extreme, and high extreme are divided into early stage, middle stage, late stage, and peak stage. According to this lady's prediction, you're a genius that can fight against peak stage at early stage. In the divine realm, such geniuses might not be everywhere, but surely are not a few. Ling Han's heart thumped. If he claimed second at fighting at the same tier amongst the younger generation of the vast lands, amongst the martial artists in the entire vast lands, no one would dare claim first, and it would still be so even if the Sword Emperor and the Setting Sun Saber Emperor were dragged back to this tier again. On one land, the number 1 in 10,000 years actually couldn't rank amongst the top geniuses in the divine realm. Hiss, how freakish was the divine realm! Thinking again, the divine realm's resources definitely surpassed the mortal realms by countless times, and perhaps there were some nature-defying things that could skyrocket a martial artist's battle prowess, just like heavenly luckstone that Ling Han had once refined could that not exist in the divine realm. Perhaps there were even more powerful things. In a world so small that even Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire looked down on the vast lands as if they were a mayfly, Ling Han could grow to a level comparable to the divine level's geniuses. Then after he entered the divine realm, could he not become even stronger? So what about the finest geniuses? I can surpass them. Ling Han instantly recovered his confidence, and a smile surfaced at the corner of his lips, full of fighting spirit. At this moment, he itched to charge into the divine realm to fight against the Sword Emperor and the Setting Sun Saber Emperor, and then take back Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to make her the daughter-in-law of the Ling family and warm his bed every day. Ugh! Yi Shuang shivered. Why did your eyes suddenly become so perverted? Damn brat. Were you fantasizing about this lady? You? Hee hee. Ling Han shrugged. What's that supposed to mean? Do you think this lady isn't beautiful enough? Yi Shuang was angered. How baffling. Ling Han diverged from the substanceless topic and said, how about you, what tier, and how many levels can your battle prowess surpass? Yi Shuang placed her hand on her hips proudly, and said, this lady is an expert at Sun Moon tier. I reached small extremes middle stage, but being trapped for 10,000 years, my cultivation already dropped to small extremes early stage, and the battle prowess even dropped to mountain river tier small extremes early stage. No wonder she could still easily suppress Corpse Boss. Despite being suppressed by the realm's power, she definitely could unleash the power at the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, with an unknown amount of stars of battle prowess. At this lady's peak stage, she can fight late stage at early stage, crossing 2 small tiers. This is called a 2-star genius in the divine realm. Yi Shuang saw that Ling Han was totally unconcerned, and immediately went on, what do you know? In the divine realm, crossing a small tier is already remarkable, called a 1-star genius, and it's 1 in hundreds of millions. You think that there are mediocre people amongst those that can become gods? That was true. placed in the vast lands, which Shattering Void tier elite wasn't a genius amongst geniuses, and to defeat them surpassing tiers was difficult. It was the same placed in the divine realm. Being able to ascend to God tier, unless it was from being pumped up by taking medicine, weren't those who broke through with their own diligent cultivation also geniuses amongst geniuses? To still win surpassing tiers, it would be hard. In a similar fashion, above that are 2-star geniuses, 3-star geniuses, and 4-star geniuses. As far as this lady knows, there are only a few 4-star geniuses, and there was once a 5-star genius, recorded only in the ancient books, Yi Shuang said unhurriedly. Ling Han was confident in himself. He'd only cultivated the first layer of indestructible heaven's scroll, which already made him the #1 genius recognized by the martial arts stone. If he were to master the second layer, what level could he reach? He looked at Yi Shuang with a smile and said, "I have a matter to discuss with you." "What, you're coveting this lady's treasure?" As if guarding from a thief, Yi Shuang held the crystal skeletal hand tightly. "Am I a person that lacking in class?" "Hard to say." Ling Han was speechless for a while, then said, "Even if I covet it, I can't beat you, right?" "Yeah." Yi Shuang finally stopped worrying and said, "What matter do you want to discuss?" "I lack the art for the 10th level, and want to borrow one from you first," Ling Han said. The arts he grasped only reached the 9th level, which could only be cultivated till the peak stage of the heaven tier. Theoretically, he indeed could create his own 10th level art and advance into the Shattering Void tier, but how much time would that take? Even if he already stood on the grounds of predecessors, it would still take hundreds of years. He couldn't wait that long. "Ha!" Yi Shuang immediately laughed loudly, and said proudly, "Sure, but what will you use to exchange? Even if it's just borrowing, it can't be a verbal statement without proof. You have to take something as pledge, right? Tell me, what do you want?" Ling Han was prepared to be taken advantage of. After all, it was worth at least 100 years, which was more valuable than any treasure. However, he definitely wouldn't take out the Black Tower, the Heaven Transformation Bowl, or the Revere Life Sword. At worst, he would just sneak into the 5 great sects and think of ways to steal. With the Black Tower in hand, it wasn't something impossible. "You've come all the way from a small country in the desolate north. This lady doesn't believe that you really relied on your own hard work. Quick, tell this lady, what mystic treasure exactly do you have?" Yi Shuang's eyes sparkled, filled with curiosity. Ling Han said unhurriedly, "Actually, I'm the reincarnation of a Shattering Void tier, so my cultivation speed is obviously fast." Yi Shuang rolled her eyes at him and said, "A soul's reincarnation in the divine realm is almost impossible, unless one obtained the exceptional divine item, Reincarnation Flower. Like how this lady believes you. Besides, if you were a Shattering Void tier's reincarnation, would you need a 10th layer art?" "Yes, this chick isn't stupid." Ling Han's heart raced. So, a soul's reincarnation in the divine realm was also extremely rare? Hiss, exactly how high did the level of the Black Tower reach, not only making his soul reincarnate, and first preserving it for 10,000 years, allowing him to constantly fathom indestructible heaven's scroll during the 10,000 years. He'd already overestimated the Black Tower, but now, he seemed to have underestimated it. "Sigh, you don't believe it even if I tell you I can't help it." Ling Han shrugged. He definitely wouldn't reveal the secret of the Black Tower. "Then the 10th level art you want, you can say goodbye to it." Yi Shuang said unhappily. Then he'd say goodbye. There was nothing impossible in the world, and all he had to do was take time to think of another way. He was still a while away from the peak stage of the heaven tier anyway. "Go back." He called Helian Sun Shui and the others. He had to quickly take care of the problem of the East region. Chapter 778. East Region's Elites Assault. East Region, second only to the Middle State in terms of martial arts and on par with the South Region, both having heaven tier elites. The invasion of the North Region this time was originally rejected by the East Region's elites, but they couldn't disobey the 5 great sects' will, and had to sortie several heaven tier elites, bringing large amounts of deity transformation tier, spiritual infant tier, and flower blossom tier warriors while opening the region barrier with a 10th tier spirit tool lent by the 5 great sects to launch an attack on the North Region. A combination like this was obviously invincible. They conquered cities and strongholds along the way almost without any effort, as each city chose to surrender very cooperatively. However, the East region's elites didn't notice that almost every household worshipped a black tower, which still continually accumulated the spirit of the people. The power of the nation could only be devoured and annihilated in a war between nations. They were now like robbers, being able to capture territory, but unable to destroy the hearts of the people. Of course, if the imperial city and the emperor were destroyed, then with the country's roots dead, the country wouldn't be a country, it'd be equivalent to hitting where it hurt, being just as deadly. The various regions would cooperate obviously because they received orders. Ling Han already returned to the imperial city. On the way, he intentionally lured the enemy to venture deep, making them go deep into Great Ling Empire's interior, where he would annihilate them all. The opponent pressed on very fast, and left Flower Blossom tier martial artists to keep watch over the seized cities while the elites continued to march west, towards the imperial city. Ling Han, I have a matter to discuss with you. Right when he returned to the imperial city, Ling Han was dragged over by Helian Sun Shui. Ling Han was startled. Was this chick trying to be lewd in broad daylight? What's with your expression? Helian Sun Shui pulled him to the side and said, the Sea Race's people have already come. Ling Han looked at her and said, where? They were sent fleeing by Yi Shuang Shuang, Helian Sun Shui said. This time, not only Shenyu royal family came, my family also did. Originally, I wanted to hide from them, but knowing the truth about the settling, I felt that my family could be won over, so I wrote a letter to have that person from my family bring it to my father. In other words, Helian's royal family knows that you're here? Ling Han said. Yes. Helian Sun Shui nodded. If you think I've done something wrong, I can leave, and I definitely won't implicate you. Ling Han pressed her down on his thigh, greeted her but with a bunch of slaps, and said, you think I'm the kind of person to throw away the mother of my child? You ought to take a beating. Good beating. Good beating. Hunyou immediately jumped out from behind a stone pillar and threw a kick, and said, Ling Han, let's beat her to death and eat stewed dragon beat. Whoever contested with her for Ling Han would be treated as a target that needed to be destroyed. But, unfortunately, Ling Han didn't allow it, giving Hunyou no choice. Helian Sun Shui, however, turned over and rode on top of Ling Han. Her almond-shaped eyes burst with flames as she tore open Ling Han's clothes and said fiercely, how many times do you owe me? Ew. Hunyou covered her eyes with both hands in a hurry. The sea girl was really too dirty and was going to corrupt Nyou's pure spirit. Hunyou's still here, aren't you afraid of corrupting children? Ling Han hurriedly turned over again, pressing Helian Sun Shui below his body. Cece, Nyou also wants to play. Hunyou pounced on top. She thought that the two were just playing. With Hunyou present, Helian Sun Shui obviously couldn't claim back her debt, and her temper naturally remained somewhat irritable. Fortunately, Ling Jian Shui woke up and made her rush to breastfeed. Hunyou looked on by the side and said, why doesn't little Snow look anything like Ling Han? He's still young, so it's obviously hard to tell, Lu Yutong said. She and Li Sichong would help look after Ling Jian Shui, who was Ling family's current little beloved baby. Everyone of all statuses pampered him to the bones. Yeah. The lit fellow chuckled and reached out his small hand to grab Lu Yutong's breasts. Apparently, he thought that Lu Yutong's breasts were more ample and should taste more delicious, making Helian Sun Shui quite depressed. After a few days, the East region's elite coalition already arrived several hundred meters from the imperial city. They would be able to pull out Great Ling Empire's backbone in the next step, thoroughly destroying the newborn king's court. Ling Han commanded everyone out. It was time to draw the net. East region's elites fought smoothly all the way here. Besides, who didn't know that North region's martial arts level was the lowest? Thus, each one of them was obviously proud and arrogant, not thinking that North region had any sort of power that could obstruct them. They found it strange that, with North region's inadequate strength, they would go as far as to make Middle State that nervous, forcing them to sortie almost all their top powers. Look, didn't they easily advance to the Great Ling Empire's imperial city? Now, everything would be resolved. Ling Han brought Hunyou to greet the enemy. I am Great Ling Empire, son of heaven, and if you all dare to assault my empire, you shall all die. But considering you guys are also just obeying orders, I'll give you all a chance. Surrender now. I can spare your lives. Ling Han said, his voice rumbling throughout the entire imperial city, even through the totem resounding in every single city. This was miraculous effect of totems, which could connect the entire Great Ling Empire. Ha 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 ha. East Region's elites were taken aback shortly, then couldn't help but burst into laughter. This brat was really the emperor? Not just a laughingstock? A mere deity transformation tier warrior dared to demand they surrender. What a real exaggerated opinion of his own abilities. Brat, I'll kill you. A deity transformation tier warrior jumped out. He looked to be 40 years old, but his real age was at least over 200, which could be clearly seen from chi and blood. Ling Han walked over in large strides and said, if you can block this emperor's one move, this emperor will spare your life. Bull **T, watch me kill you in one move. That person was furious, and charged over while brandishing a large saber. The boiling presence shocked the air. His strength was quite astonishing, and he could be called an expert even in the deity transformation tier. Ling Han had his hands behind his back. The moment the opponent's assault arrived, he casually threw out a palm. That person instantly split into pieces. Deity transformation tier blood essence propagated heaven and earth, turning into multicolored divine light, an extremely shocking thing. Ling Han withdrew his hand and said indifferently, there aren't many chances left, is there still no one willing to surrender? The palm he displayed shocked the elites of the East region. That deity transformation tier warrior wasn't weak, being a renowned elite in the East region, sufficient to rank in the top hundreds. However, such an elite was actually killed by a single palm, demonstrating just how astonishing Ling Han's strength was. They underestimated the North region. They never would have thought that there was actually such an elite here. A heaven tier elite walked out, wearing a grim smile and said, indeed remarkable, a deity transformation tier warrior that has heaven tier battle prowess, worthy of being called a peerless genius. But do you know that establishing a nation is something that goes against the heavenly laws? Ling Han cracked a smile and said, may I ask, how does it go against the heavenly laws? The rules agreed on by the old ancestors, what else? That heaven tier said coldly. These people were brainwashed into stupidity. They obviously had to be convinced through a beating. Ling Han waved his hand and sneered, if your old ancestor tells you to eat **T, do you eat it? Chapter 779. All settled. Crazy ravings. That heaven tier elite reprimanded. The old ancestors' rules have weathered tens of thousands of years and are obviously the universal truth. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, you fool, what old ancestors' rules? Those were clearly drawn up by elites. I'm strong, I have a say, that's the constant truth of all ages. If that's the case, then this old man will convince you through a beating. That heaven tier walked in large strides. His spirit and chi burst forth as if a blazing furnace. Then I'll take you as the chicken, and kill you for the monkeys to see, Ling Han said with a smile. Impudence! That heaven tier elite was infuriated. He was a heaven tier elite, a supreme being in the East region, and now he was actually likened to a chicken. How could this not make him furious? He snorted and unleashed a long azure whip. With a shake, the whip immediately straightened, looking as if a long spear. Senior Zhang's furious, he's serious. That's for sure. Senior Zhang is a well-known figure in our East region who can rank in the top 5 amongst the strongest. This brat dared to humiliate Senior Zhang, he's absolutely asking to die. The East region's elites discussed animatedly, obviously thinking that Ling Han was dead for sure. That heaven tier elite surname was Jia Wan with a single character named Zhang. But no one dared to call him directly by his name, and all called him by Senior Zhang. Jia Zhang was one of the leading figures of East region's elites on this expedition. His intervention could be seen as a king going against a king, the battle of the strongest of the two parties. Of course, from the East region's elite's perspective, the battle was without a doubt going to be Jia Zhang's victory. Ling Han extended his right hand and said indifferently, I'll use only one hand. Fuck. Flames instantly flickered above Jia Zhangji's head. An elite that reached his tier, even without cultivating fire-type arts, could still draw on heaven and earth spirit chi to turn it into fire with a single thought. He was obviously furious. A mere deity transformation tier junior. No matter how amazing his talent, he actually dared not to use both hands against him, making him furious to the point of bursting out fire from both eyes. This junior was seriously seeking his own death. He brandished the whip spear and attacked Ling Han. Ling Han had never seen such a weapon, and couldn't help but be curious, shifting his feet to see what exactly was remarkable about such a skill. Don't say, the spirit tool truly was somewhat out of the ordinary. It could be thrust like a spear, but after it was blocked, it could turn into a soft whip, forming lashing attacks. Veined patterns were also branded on top of it, and after it was activated, it emitted a light blue light, its powers astonishing. For him to be able to rank amongst the strongest in the East region, it was obviously not from bluffing. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. My physique can compare to 9th tier rare metal. How do you plan to harm me? Even if melted with strange fire, it wouldn't take a short period of time, at least taking several days and nights to refine. Although Jia Zhang was very energetic in his attacks and seemed to have the advantage on the scene, pressuring Ling Han, but in reality, Ling Han wasn't threatened at all. Ling Han simply wanted to look at the whip spear's transformation, which was why he never fought back all along. Senior Zhang, kill this heaven-daring guy. Yeah, slaughter this brat so that we can return to the East region. This place's spirit chi is too thin, and staying here one more day would be the loss of one more day. Everyone shouted one after another, hoping that the errand of killing Ling Han would be taken care of quickly so that they could return to the East region as soon as possible. Jia Zhang obviously very much wanted to take care of Ling Han, but he knew inside that Ling Han only seemed to be at a disadvantage, but was actually extremely at ease, and he definitely couldn't take him down in a short amount of time. He couldn't help but try to taunt him. Junior, you dodging here and there. Exactly how long do you want to dodge? Behind you is the Imperial City. Where else can you dodge? Ling Han just happened to be tired of watching. With a smile, he said, "You want to be defeated that badly? All right, as you wish." He extended his right hand, and golden light radiated instantly. He already operated the earth overturning seal and pressed it towards the opponent. This was a mystical power. Ling Han had already cultivated the earth overturning seal to the point where both hands could execute it simultaneously. He could also use it with one hand. Thus, his battle prowess was only slightly weaker even though he only used the right hand. He instantly turned the tables, and on the scene, his imposing manner immediately took the initiative. The heaven-tier elites he'd encountered recently were Su Xiaofan, Corpse 2, and the like, making him feel that heaven-tier elites were very powerful. But now that it changed to Jia Zhang, he instantly felt something different. Heaven-tier was so weak. Jia Zhang could be called a supreme elite in the East region, but he couldn't possibly compare to Su Xiaofan and the others. What? Senior Zhang's actually being suppressed. How's it possible? My God, this must be fake. The East region's elites all cried out, covering their heads. This was too fake. A deity transformation tier junior was able to pressure a heaven-tier elite in a fight, and it was also a veteran heaven-tier warrior who became well-known long ago. Their view on life was about to collapse. Another heaven-tier elite snorted and said, "Now's not the time to fight solo. Our mission is to wipe out Great Ling King's court, and now the nation's master is in front of us. Brother Tu, Brother Ma, and Brother Zhang, attack with this old man together and eliminate this junior." Okay. The other heaven-tier elites nodded one after another. Indeed, it wasn't a martial arts contest, and there wasn't a need to respect the rule of 1 versus 1. A total of 7 heaven-tier elites walked out and surrounded Ling Han. Hu Niu instantly jumped out and said, "Niu will be your opponent." Ling Han laughed and said, "No, I can take care of them." Since these people were attacking together, he didn't need to keep the promise of using only one hand and unleashed the Revere Life Sword at once. With a brandish of the sword, light soared into the sky. With the blessing of the power of the nation, he deployed the mysterious 3,000, and 3,100 rays of sword light burst forth immediately, enveloping the 8 heaven-tier elites at the same time. What? Jia Zhang and the others had their eyes popping out with shock. What? How could there possibly be such a swift and fierce sword art in the world, attacking 8 heaven-tier elites at the same time and making each of them feel that it couldn't be resisted? Their realization came already too late. The sword light swept by, and the 8 heaven-tier warriors fell down, all dying instantly. In the East region's elite's camp, only silence remained. 2M Fing strong. How could there be such a freak, killing heaven-tier elites like reaping vegetables? Could this be a shattering void-tier elite? How could they resist? They couldn't resist at all. Ling Han put away his sword and said indifferently, "How about it, who wants to surrender or still stubbornly resist till the end?" The East region's party's heaven-tier warriors had all died in battle, and only deity transformation tier 1s remained. Facing Ling Han, who was like a god, they no longer had the least bit of desire to fight. Some people surrendered at once, but some people chose to run. They didn't want to become someone's servant. Hu Niu displayed her prowess and turned into a lightning, grasping one after another. Who could even escape from her hands? After luring the enemy to go deep, block the enemy's retreat and destroy them, the East region's army was declared completely annihilated. Ling Han summoned every single one of them to surrender. Faced with death, there were very few people who could look death in the eyes calmly. Besides, they were commanded to attack. They themselves had no unresolvable grievance with Ling Han, so why back it with their lives? Could they really have the middle state bestow them a title of a martyr? Chapter 780. Arriving at Dome Cloud Island. After taking care of the East region's elites, he had them take back the cities that were seized. The East region's elites were all extremely gloomy. Their running back and forth felt just like playing make-believe, absolutely like a joke. After recovering the lost territory, Ling Han had the East region's elites return to properly handle the work of East region's various large sections. After he took down the West region, he would then consider leading an army either north or east. After a few more days, the Sea Race's people came. It was a shattering void tier from Hellion family, who brought Hellion Rong's personally written letter and delivered it to Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui to read. Hellion Rong was the current generation's leader of Hellion royal family, and was also called King Hellion. He was also Hellion Sun Shui's father. The general idea in the letter was that the matter Hellion Sun Shui mentioned was too shocking. A few words in a letter weren't enough to convince anyone, and there were many questions that needed Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui to see the North Sea's royal family and personally explain. The letter also especially mentioned Ling Jian Shui, whom Hellion Rong, his maternal grandfather, wanted to personally see. So, Hellion Sun Shui asked Ling Han. Ling Han muttered to himself and said, "We must go so that we can win over your family. However, we can't exactly let our guard down, since it can be a trap." "Then what do you plan on doing?" Hellion Sun Shui said. If possible, she obviously didn't want to fall out with her family. Ling Han pondered and said, "Go ask Yi Shuang. If she's willing to be our bodyguard, this trip will be safe. However, without her keeping watch over the Imperial City, I'm worried that people will take advantage of her absence, which is rather problematic." Hellion Sun Shui nodded. Now the 5 great ancient sects and the 1,000 Corpse sect all had their eyes on Great Ling Empire. Although Purple Moon Emperor's court tied up the majority of their forces, but to send a few shattering void tier elites was still possible. Who in the Imperial City would able to rival them? Ling Han thought it over shortly, shook his head and said, "Yi Shuang is not suited to leave. I'll bring Ice Dragon Ground Blast Formation, which can rival shattering void tier 7 stars. On top of Black Tower's protection, even if there's a falling out, there's no need to be afraid." "So it's really just the 2 of us going?" Hellion Sun Shui was somewhat worried. Ling Han smiled and said, "My father-in-law wants to see his grandson, so we'll show him." "If that's the case, then I'll have to make arrangements, or else if I'm not here, the matters of the Empire would be hopelessly chaotic," Hellion Sun Shui said. Ling Han couldn't help but curl his lips and said, "You say it like I haven't done anything." Hellion Sun Shui rolled her eyes and said, "Then tell me, what have you done?" Ling Han looked at her slender and alluring figure, and couldn't help but tease her. "You!" Hellion Sun Shui was first taken aback, and then came to her senses, pinching Ling Han fiercely. This guy actually made a perverted joke, how truly rascally. Yi Shuang couldn't leave. The Imperial City was not only the center of the nation, but also Ling family's headquarters, so how could a mishap be allowed? If Yi Shuang didn't keep watch, Ling Han would definitely put his parents in the Black Tower. After all, he was now a target for all. After discussing for a while, Ling Han decided to bring Helian Sun Shui, Hu Niu, and his son to the North Sea, not bringing the others. Hu Niu hadn't reached the Shattering Void tier, but she had extremely fast speed, and even a Shattering Void tier elite would have a hard time hurting her. She could go anywhere in the world. Besides, was it possible not to bring her? The little girl was impossible to shake off. They entered the desolate north again, and first went to see the situation with the ancient mine shaft in Fire Country. The black chi was more and more terrifying, making Ling Han more worried as to when the buried dead people down there would come into the world. After taking a glance, they went out to sea and set out towards Helian royal family's ancestral grounds. After martial artists advanced to the flower blossom tier, they broke away from the mortal body, and it didn't matter if they didn't breathe or eat as long as they could absorb spirit chi, they could maintain their life force. Reaching Ling Han's height, their life force was even more formidable, and even without absorbing spirit chi, they could still hold out for several tens of years through exhausting their own origin power. Thus, they held their breath and were like fish in the great sea. Helian Sun Shui didn't even need to hold her breath. She possessed true dragon's blood, and it was no different for her whether she was in the water and on land. Actually, her battle prowess even rose in the sea. Ling Han nodded inwardly. In terms of spirit chi density, the sea wasn't superior to the land, but the sea's spirit chi was basically water element. The sea race was also basically water element, so, relatively, the sea race also had an extremely great cultivation advantage. The sea was three-dimensional. Only small fish lived in the shallow areas, but after entering the deep sea, all sorts of large fish appeared one by one. Supermassive species also appeared, especially after entering over 5,000 meters deep. These types of living creatures could easily reach several hundred of meters in size, becoming as large as a mountain, an extremely shocking thing. Even if these living creatures didn't cultivate, their brute force was terrifyingly great, being able to crush a mountain with a light bump. And hearing Helian Sun Shui's words, this actually wasn't the largest body type, not even 1/100th of it, which shocked Ling Han. Then once the supersized sea monsters matured, would they be able to rival the Shattering Void tier? After 3 days, they were already far from the desolate north. According to Helian Sun Shui, it was about 7 days' journey to Helian royal family's ancestral grounds. Against expectations, Ling Han thought Helian family's ancestral grounds were deep in the sea, but instead it was on a gigantic island. In reality, the majority of the sea race placed their ancestral grounds on islands because there were supersized living beings at the bottom of the sea. They weren't sentient and didn't cultivate, but they were born with formidable physiques. If the ancestral grounds were set at the bottom of the sea, then they'd risk the danger of them being demolished by these living beings. Then why are you bringing me to the bottom of the sea? Ling Han couldn't help but ask. Helian Sun Shui smiled and said, since we're at sea, I obviously want to properly show you the sea race's sights. Ling Han was speechless. After another 7 days, they finally arrived at Helian royal family's ancestral grounds, Dome Cloud Island. Stop! Who dares to barge in recklessly into Helian family's territory? Just when they set foot on the island, they saw 2 guard-like people charge over. Their upper body was human, but their lower body was lobster-shaped, astonishing Ling Han. As 7th princess. When they saw Helian Sun Shui, they both knelt down halfway in salutation. Helian Sun Shui avoiding marriage undoubtedly made Helian and the Xianyu royal family pursue her together. But Helian royal family never said they abolished Helian Sun Shui's position as a princess. Her bloodline was extremely rare and noble, and she definitely wouldn't be demoted just like that. If that was the case, how could these 2 lobster guards dare not to be respectful? Helian Sun Shui waved her hand and said, I want to see my father. Yes, this subordinate will immediately go report it. A lobsterman turned and left. Actually, even if Helian Sun Shui didn't say so, they would do so. Helian Sun Shui now carried the status of an escapee, and the Helian family was constantly searching for her. Ling Han stroked his chin. The saying, the ugly bride isn't afraid to meet her parents-in-law was true, and now that it was his turn to meet the father-in-law, he really felt somewhat nervous. Chapter 781. Show of Strength. Shortly, several powerful figures appeared, and although they retracted their powerful presence, they still revealed silhouettes of sun, moon, and stars as their eyes opened and closed, terrifyingly shocking. They were definitely shattering void tier powerhouses. Sun Shui, the man in the middle said, wearing a multicolored embroidered robe. He was tall and well-built, with two small buns on his head that looked as if horns that were about to grow out. It was an obvious characteristic of a dragon's descendant, but not everyone was like this. For example, Hellion Sun Shui, who didn't have any defined dragon race's characteristics, but her bloodline was considerably pure and strong. My respects to the king. Hellion Sun Shui bowed. Not to mention that the other party was Hellion family's chief and her father. The shattering void tier alone commanded respect. Ling Han pondered and said, I am Ling Han, respects to the North Sea Hellion family seniors. The Hellion family didn't clearly express whether they accepted him as a son-in-law, so Ling Han obviously wasn't willing to be enthusiastic to a cold crowd, but intended on taking things step by step instead. You guys were the one who invited me to come, so release a friendly signal. Humph. Except for Hellion Rong, the other 5 people glanced at Ling Han, revealing displeased looks. It was this man who destroyed Hellion and Xianyu's cooperative relationship truly deserved to be killed. Hellion Rong nodded and said, let's talk after we enter the room. The 6 people turned, while Hellion Sun Shui signaled at Ling Han with her eyes, and followed behind them. Ling Han pulled on Hunyo's hand and walked forward while saying in low voice, would your father lure us in and then lock up and beat us? Although his voice was low, Hellion Rong and the other 5 were powerful, and couldn't possibly not hear it. Their faces twitched, and they had an urge to give Ling Han a sound thrashing. Hellion Sun Shui also appeared awkward, glaring at Ling Han. This guy was actually still fooling around. If she didn't have a son with him, she really wanted to give him a fierce whipping. The group walked into a hall, where many people were already seated. Many more people were still on their way, young and old. The seniors had seats, while the juniors could only stand in the surrounding. But there were also exceptions, since a few youngsters full of martial spirit received seats that were quite near the front. They should be the leading figures of Hellion family's next generation if they could qualify to be bestowed with a seat. Ling Han took a glance. The majority of these youngsters were in the deity transformation tier, but there were 2 that advanced into the heaven tier but were somewhat older. It couldn't be discerned from their looks, but judging from their chi and blood, they should be 40 to 50 years old. It couldn't be judged very accurately. Sun Shui, you ran from the marriage without permission, do you know your crimes? An old man suddenly opened up with an intense interrogative tone, his voice rumbling. A show of strength. Ling Han came out boldly with a smile and said, everybody, this time we, husband and wife, accepted the invitation and came to the sea race, to discuss the matter of the settling, so why suddenly mention Sun Shui? If that's the case, we can only turn around and leave. Outrageous human, you dare to be impudent in front of this old man? The old man shouted furiously. He was a shattering void tier elite, and with his fury, his aura rippled and instantly made many people feel oppression in their chests. Even their flesh was about to rupture. Ling Han was unafraid. When he and Hellion Sun Shui rushed here, Hellion Rong and the other 5 shattering void tier elites personally greeted them, and although Hellion Rong didn't say any words of welcome, it was a sort of declaration of position, a considerably high standard in treatment. Thus, it could be thought of as them playing good cop bad cop, white and black. They were showing goodwill previously, and now someone was playing bad cop, giving Ling Han a show of strength. If Ling Han didn't come out boldly, he would obviously be looked down upon. Seeing his own wife being reprimanded and refusing to confront it, what good was there keeping such a man? Ling Han said indifferently, if Hellion royal family does not welcome us, then we'll just leave. Coming here, you think you can leave just because you say you will? Another shattering void tier powerhouse spoke up. He looked only 40, his figure surprisingly stalwart, and his height reaching over 3 meters. He looked like a small mountain standing there, shockingly oppressive. Ling Han swept a glance at him and said, oh, you want to stop us? Come, attack, let me see the powerfulness of the sea race. If he kept yielding, then he would only let the Hellion clan think he was easy to bully, and in the following negotiations, he would only be at an absolute disadvantage. So, he also wanted a fight to give Hellion family a show of strength. Haha, you want to challenge this general? That giant couldn't help but laugh. It was definitely the best and most arrogant joke he had ever heard. A mere deity transformation tier dared to challenge a shattering void tier elite. You don't dare? If you don't dare to, then don't be pesky. It's not like you're one who has the right to make decisions. Ling Han said coldly. Fuck, this brat's too arrogant. Many people were in a violent rage. In their eyes, the human race represented weakness, and now the weak dared to provoke the strong, obviously making them both surprised and infuriated. Too detestable. That giant wasn't from Hellion royal family, but he was one of the king's 7 generals, surnamed Yu. Xuan Yu was also a large family, a clan that adhered to the Hellion royal family, and the strongest elite in the clan was Yu Zhenshan, with cultivation of the 3rd layer of the Shattering Void tier. Hellion royal family had a little over 30 Shattering Void tiers, which included these adhering forces, and in Hellion families alone, there were roughly 20 Shattering Void tier elites, which was also an extremely surprising thing. Before coming here, Hellion Sun Shui already analyzed the various great forces of the sea race, so Ling Han didn't lack understanding of them. The reason why Hellion royal family could have so many Shattering Void tier elites was because of the existence of ancestral blood, making it relatively easier to advance to this tier. Secondly, they were descendants of the dragon race and had longer lifespan, living 3 times longer compared to the human race at any tier. The possibility of breaking through was obviously a little higher with more time, especially 3 times the time, which could create endless possibilities. Besides, human Shattering Void tier elites only had roughly 1,000 years of lifespan, but the sea race's royal family reached up to 4,000 years. With 3 more generations of accumulation, how could there not be lots of Shattering Void tier powerhouses? Haha, Human Junior, if you can take one of this general's move, this general will allow you to talk. Yu Zhenshan laughed from extreme anger. The other people didn't speak and tacitly approved of Yu Zhenshan's method, which clearly was to give Ling Han a hard time. Of course, they also wouldn't do too much to Ling Han. Firstly, they indeed wanted to confirm the truth about the settling, and secondly, they suffered enough at the hands of Yi Shuang, so they wouldn't dare be too unbridled either. Third ancestor, there's no need for you to personally attack, allow me. A man who was also stalwart jumped out, pointed at Ling Han, and said, I am Xuanyu family's Yu Zai. Human, await your death. Seeing Yu Zai jump out, some of Hellion family's people instantly frowned. Shattering Void tier elites knew more or less about the settling and knew the purpose of inviting Ling Han over, so no matter how furious they were, they'd attack with proper restraint. However, the settling involved too much, and they didn't dare let the juniors know. Any leaks could incur the calamity of the clan's destruction. Yu Zai was part of the masses that didn't know the truth, and although he was only in the deity transformation tier, he reached the 9th layer and his battle prowess was terrifying, comparable to low-level heaven tier. If he accidentally beat Ling Han to death, the matter would also be grave. Chapter 782. Counter Checkmate. Moreover, everyone in the Hellion clan knew that Yu Zai liked Hellion Sun Shui and followed her everywhere in pursuit of her, but his love was unrequited, and it wasn't until Hellion Sun Shui was betrothed to Xianyu Dongming that Yu Zai finally gave up. It couldn't be helped. This involved the survival of 2 clans, or else both clans could be annihilated by the Wunren royal family. However, now that Hellion Sun Shui even gave birth to a son, it was obviously impossible for her to marry into Xianyu royal family. Xianyu Dongming even died, so his heart livened up again. If Ling Han was killed, would he be able to fill the position? He didn't mind being the backup man. He indeed liked Hellion Sun Shui crazily, or else any more sane person would have thought of something. If you kill her man, would she still want to marry you? Marrying a chicken or a dog, she wouldn't even take a glance at you. Who couldn't guess Yu Zai's thoughts? Therefore, everyone wanted advice against it. They only wanted to give Ling Han a bit of pain to make him more obedient, and had no intention of taking his life. Allow him. Hellion Rong waved his hand. If Ling Han was still no match when fighting in the same tier, why would he want such a son-in-law? To be shamed. Yu Zai instantly exulted. The king said so. So was that expressing an intention of taking him as a son-in-law? He walked out in large strides and said, Human, don't say I'm bullying you, I'll only use one hand. Hellion Sun Shui and Hu Niu both smiled. Other people didn't know, but could they not know clearly of Ling Han's strength? Not to mention such a deity transformation tier warrior, a heaven tier one would also be instantly chopped into mush, and even if a shattering void tier came, wasn't there still the ice dragon ground blast formation? The Hellion family wanted to give Ling Han a show of strength, but wasn't Ling Han intent on doing the same? Ling Han smiled faintly, walked 2 steps toward him, and said, "You're really going to use just one hand?" "Of course. When have I, Yu Zai, ever gone back on my words?" Yu Zai appeared full of confidence. "Then thank you," Ling Han said with a smile. "Then to express my respect for you, I'll give it my all. That's the greatest respect for you, right?" Yu Zai cracked a smile. This human was truly a coward. "I'm about to steal your wife, and you're still going on about tribute and respect. Hee hee, I'm surely going to steal your wife." He patted his chest and said, "Take out your strongest move." "Okay." Ling Han unleashed the Revere Life Sword, brandished the sword gently, and then held it parallel to his chest. All the Shattering Void tier elites squinted their eyes, feeling a shred of nervousness. Even if they deliberately restrained themselves, how terrifying a thing was it for so many elites feeling nervous simultaneously. Instantly, many people covered their chests, their faces turning pale, and even Heaven tier warriors almost slid off their chairs. Shattering Void tier powerhouses, standing at humanity's peak, were shockingly powerful. Yu Zai also retreated 7 steps. Fortunately, Yu Zhenshan nudged his back, allowing him to stop in his steps, or else he'd definitely slump to the ground. "Human, this sword, does it have a name?" a Shattering Void tier powerhouse asked. He felt an immense menace from the veined patterns on the sword, as if once these formation patterns were activated, it could even kill him easily. However, it clearly wasn't a spirit tool. "The Revere Life Sword." Ling Han stroked the blade, smiled faintly, and said, "The original owner named it the world's greatest killing sword, but I felt it too arrogant, and slaughter harms the heavenly harmony, so revering life was better." "The world's greatest killing sword," several Shattering Void tier elites muttered, their eyes lighting up, thinking about whether or not to take out some treasure to exchange for the Revere Life Sword with this human. It was enough to increase their battle prowess by 10 stars. Yu Zhenshan's expression was also stern as he said, "Zai, you mustn't be careless, this sword is unusual." Yu Zai made little of it. No matter how strong spirit tools were, it also depended on who was using it. Could a mere deity transformation tier warrior unleash the power of a 10th tier spirit tool? At most, it was just slightly sharper, so what did he need to fear? However, he didn't dare to argue with Yu Zhenshan, and said in a hurry, "Third ancestor Zai understands." He walked forward a few more steps, and said, "Human, is this what you're counting on?" Ling Han nodded and said, "Poor, right? But it's all I have, don't take it to heart." The Shattering Void tier elites' faces all twitched. Having such an exceptional divine sword, you still freaking said you were poor. Then what were they? Beggars? 10th tier rare metal was too rare, and definitely not every Shattering Void tier possessed a corresponding spirit tool. Therefore, many Shattering Void tier powerhouses would extract a part of their body to make into a spirit tool. Firstly, it was indeed more handy, and secondly, they were forced to do so as they had no choice. Of course, some people used their own bones and old skin to make spirit tools because it was stronger. For example, Corpse 2, his former self, was definitely extremely powerful, and there was no way that he couldn't acquire 10th tier rare metal, yet he deliberately pulled out his own femur to make a spirit tool. This was precisely because he was too powerful, and other spirit tools were no match. "You can attack." Yu Zai was full of confidence. First, he didn't know how terrifying the Revere Life Sword was, and second, the long-established perception made him think that humans couldn't even withstand a single blow. Now, he had advantage in tier, so it would obviously be even more of a sweep. So what if the opponent held a divine weapon? Ling Han held the long sword flat and began to operate the 10,000 techniques return to 1. Once the sword intent came, Yu Zai was agitated, feeling ice cold all over his body and unable to breathe. His mind was blank, and he clenched his hands tightly, sweating profusely. The Shattering Void tier elites were all shocked. Although the sword hadn't been swung, could they not determine with their judgment that this sword attack's destructive power was at least Heaven tier 9 stars? Yu Zai was indeed a genius, being able to possess Heaven tier battle prowess at the deity transformation tier, but at most had 1 star, and such a gap was like heaven and earth. Stop! Yu Zhenshan hurriedly stepped forward to protect Yu Zai. If Ling Han were to unleash the sword, this outstanding descendant would definitely be dead. Ling Han pretended to be startled and said, "Didn't you say it'd be a fight using one hand? Why are two people fighting me together now?" Yu Zhenshan's expression couldn't help but turn dark. "You freaking did it on purpose." Their fucker, it was definitely on purpose, clearly knowing how terrifying his sword attack's power is. Yet you play dumb to make my foolish descendant bite the bait. He snorted and said, "Zai isn't your match, we lost this fight." "How can that be? We haven't even competed, who knows the outcome of the fight?" Ling Han shook his head. "Senior, don't be humble, let this whatever fish fight with me to see who is stronger." Yu Zhenshan almost swatted Ling Han fight what out? If Ling Han unleashed his sword, Yu Zai would become a corpse right away. He snorted and said, "Human, don't you overdo it." "Overdo it?" Ling Han said with a smile. "I came here without a single soldier, full of good faith, but everyone here are all shattering void tier elites yet target me, wanting to give me a head-on blow, so who exactly went too far?" The shattering void tier elites couldn't help but look embarrassed, for he hit the nail on the head. Chapter 783. Dupe one more time. Yu Zhenshan suppressed the urge to swat Ling Han to death, asking with a sullen face, "What exactly do you want to do?" Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "If you can give me some compensation to comfort my wounded heart, I won't fuss about it." Everyone was tongue-tied. They'd seen shameless people, but to ask for compensation so frankly, this one was probably the first. If it were only Ling Han, Yu Zhenshan would obviously ignore him and just end it by swatting him to death. However, Ling Han was in fact Hellion royal family's son-in-law, and as Hellion subordinate clan, if he dared to murder the royal family's son-in-law, then Xuanyu clan would definitely be exterminated. Regarding the royal family, how could others be allowed to interfere? Even if Ling Han were to be killed, then it would have to be Hellion family that did it, others weren't fit to do so. After Yu Zhenshan took a few slight breaths, he waved his hands regretfully. Instantly, the ground was full of treasures. There were corals that were crimson red like blood and pearls the size of fists, glowing all over, lighting up the eyes of quite a few shattering void tears, who had the desire to reach out their hands. "Now this should do." Yu Zhenshan snorted. Smiling broadly, Ling Han stored away the treasures and muttered, "Blood coral has the effect of strengthening the physique. Millennium pearl, although its effects are slightly worse, they aren't bad as stewed porridge, and dark tortoise shell can be refined into a protective gear. Not bad. Not bad." Everyone here was a powerhouse and could obviously hear his mutters, and thus had the urge to beat him up. It wasn't just not bad, even they were moved, and you still complain about the effects being slightly worse. Ling Han stored away the treasures and said to Yu Zhenshan, "Thanks. However, senior's definitely feeling extremely out of sorts, losing so many treasures for nothing. How about we make a bet?" "What do you want to bet?" Yu Zhenshan said coldly. He didn't know whether this human brat was extremely daring or simple-minded to the level of an idiot. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "Before, didn't Senior say that you wanted to give me advice? Just the time we can make a bet. If Senior can beat me, I'll return those treasures I took just now to Senior." Once everyone heard, they felt that Ling Han was crazy. Wasn't this just embarrassing himself? "Hee, this human brat really knows how to conduct himself," someone said. "How so?" The others were perplexed. Ling Han clearly had no respect for anyone. The person from earlier said, "That human definitely isn't a match for old you, but with this bet, he can return the treasures he just extorted. Won't old you be happy?" Makes sense, and he'd also be indebted to this human. Yeah, why didn't I think of it? Humans have many cunning plots and can't be trusted. However, this human indeed knows how to conduct himself, switching from arrogance to deference, stabbing you first, then bootlicking fiercely. This bootlicking will obviously feel extremely good. Too awful, he clearly isn't taking out anything and is only returning General Yu's treasures. That's why humans are too mischievous. Ling Han's hearing wasn't bad, either, and he obviously heard it all clearly. His expression was strange, for he didn't want to bootlick Yu Zhenshan, but dupe him once more. Did these people have problems with their heads? He was just at the deity transformation tier. Who would believe that a deity transformation tier warrior could rival a shattering void tier 1? Even Yu Jianshan thought that Ling Han wanted to reconcile and couldn't help but reveal a smile, and said, "All right, this general accepts the bet." After all, Ling Han was Hellion family's son-in-law, and since Ling Han gave him a way out, he couldn't overdo it. "Human, go for it. This lord will grant you 10 moves, then unleash 1 move," he said. Allowing Ling Han to unleash 10 moves first obviously gave him enough face. Or else, could a deity transformation tier warrior go through 10 moves under the hands of a shattering void tier opponent? "No way in hell." Ling Han said, "What if General Yu loses?" Being misunderstood, he was too lazy to call Yu Jianshan Sr. and called him by his official position, which wasn't impolite, either. Yu Jianshan was startled. "You freaking want to win? Did your brain get muddled up?" But thinking that Ling Han was possibly giving him some face, he said, "If you win, this general will obviously give you a stake of equal value." Ling Han cupped his hands and said, "Then thank you, General Yu." Not bad. He swindled another batch of betrothal gifts. Yu Jianshan didn't take it to heart, but simply thought that Ling Han was seeking a way out. He nodded and said, "Go for it. Please give pointers, General Yu." With a casual spray of the hand, Ling Han already laid out 108 short swords. Wang, the heaven and earth spirit chi poured in incessantly, and the temperature instantly dropped abruptly. What is this formation? It seems very powerful." "This human's actually also a formation master. Wasn't he a heaven-grade alchemist? An alchemist and a formation master, and such amazing talent in martial arts. Is he a freak?" Everyone discussed animatedly, but when the temperature became lower and lower, spirit chi condensed into a white pillar, and even the shattering void tier elite's expressions turned pale. Too powerful. Cold sweat dripped down from Yu Jianshan's forehead. At this moment, he really wanted to curse. Fucking H*T, duped again by this human. This formation was too terrifying. What was even more infuriating was that this human clearly could immediately lay out the formation, yet he irritatingly set up the formation slowly. This was deliberately teasing him. But the problem was that he previously said he'd grant Ling Han 10 moves, so could he attack first and resolve the formation before it formed? Did he still want face? Yu Jianshan felt extreme chest pains, which was literally caused by anger. People said that one who fell in one pit twice was an idiot, but his junior was just duped, and in the blink of an eye, he fell in the same pit, making him feel absolutely depressed. This human was too evil, too crafty, and too much of a fucking cheat. Keeping Yu Jianshan on tenterhooks long enough, just when the general's veins were about to burst, Ling Han finally completed the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. In reality, he wasn't completely teasing Yu Jianshan, but he was holding back for another reason, not wanting others to know in just how much time he could set up the formation, leaving room for maneuver in the future. The ice dragon appeared, and the sky instantly rained down with ice fragments as if it suddenly reverted to winter, and one that was severely cold. "Go!" Ling Han pointed at where he willed. The ice dragon immediately rose up and dove towards Yu Jianshan. This was ironic. The sea race obviously worshipped the true dragon as their distant ancestor, but a human summoned a true dragon, albeit an ice dragon formed by formation. It still made the faces of the shattering void tier elites of the Hellion family flushed. Ice Dragon possessed shattering void tier 7 stars of battle prowess, but Yu Jianshan was only in the 3rd layer of the shattering void tier, and his battle prowess was also 3 stars, so how could he resist the ice dragon? At the shattering void tier, 1 star's difference in battle prowess was a world's difference, and the gap of 4 stars would be an absolute crush. Yu Jianshan only resisted 7 moves before having no choice but to surrender. If he kept fighting, he truly would be heavily injured, and it would be even more insufferable for his reputation. He sprayed out a large pile of treasures and grabbed Yu's eye as he left the main hall, really having no face to stay any longer. Chapter 784. Reaching a Consensus. Such a result, who could have expected it? Someone at the deity transformation tier really defeated a shattering void tier opponent. Although it wasn't Ling Han's true strength, It was Ling Han's ability being able to operate such a formation, something you didn't have, right? Even Helion Rong couldn't help but reveal a strange expression. He waved his hand and said, "Chen Su, go comfort Jianshan. It's just a spar, and losing to such a formation, no one will say anything." "Yes." A middle-aged-looking man of the Shattering Void tier nodded, disappearing with a leap. The people in the hall were all stern-faced. Helion Rong had already decided the nature of this matter. It was simply a spar and no one will say anything, so if anyone dared wag their tongue, it would obviously be disobeying Helion royal family's will, which was an extremely dangerous thing. In other words, the matter of Yu Jianshan losing to Ling Han couldn't be mentioned. Helion Rong was full of smiles, looking at Ling Han, who was counting treasures, and said, not bad, youngster, you're courageous and wise, brave and astute. I've thought to give you a show of strength, but you unexpectedly checkmated me." Ling Han already stored away all the treasures and, grinning, said, "Lord Father-in-law, you're not thinking of splitting these betrothal gifts with me. Is that only why you're being courteous to me?" Pooh, a few youngsters couldn't hold it at the moment and spurted out violently. This human thought Helion Rong was also a money grubber like him? As one of the North Sea's 3 royal families, Helion family's wealth was astonishing. Any little thing taken out surpassed what Xuanyu family could have countless times. Helion Rong, however, said, "Why not? Betrothal gifts should be collected by this king." "Lord Father-in-law, that's not good to say. You're, after all, one of North Sea's 3 royal families. Would you lack this bit of treasure?" Ling Han said with a smile. "These years, the landlords also don't have surplus grain. Besides, who would hold something against treasures?" Helion Rong didn't concede. The few juniors were still bewildered, but the older generations knew that both parties already began the negotiations, trying to take the initiative and hold more advantage. Ling Han laughed mischievously and said, "All right, for the sake of Sun Shui, this son-in-law is willing to discuss frankly and sincerely." Helion Rong gave Ling Han a profound look and said, "Except for those at the Shattering Void tier, everyone else backed down." Everyone was puzzled. That was it? They were just going to let this human act arrogantly, and not put him in order? However, the king already gave the order, and who dared to disobey? Instantly, all the juniors and seniors retreated, leaving only 17 Shattering Void tier elites. The strongest elites didn't all come. It was quite normal, since Shattering Void tier powerhouses needed to cultivate in seclusion, and 1 star was a world's difference. Who didn't want to increase their battle prowess? Ling Han, Helion Sun Shui, and Hunyo obviously didn't leave. Hunyo was the typical one who never treated herself as an outsider, and immediately found a chair to sit down in and started to crack melon seeds with her teeth. "Regarding the settling from start to end, elaborate on it in detail," Helion Rong said. Ling Han actually didn't want to speak about the settling on the outside. There were ears separated by the sky. The Divine Realm's 5 sects possessed remarkable abilities, and might be listening in on these keywords. If they were to launch an attack in advance, there'd be even more variables. However, he couldn't trust Helion Rong and reveal the secret of the Black Tower, so he weighed the matter, still deciding to declare it here. Anyway, he already walked on the path against the 5 sects, and they probably could guess a little. This secret really wasn't a secret now. He spoke in detail about obtaining Zi Shuexian's message and the matters on Purple Moon Emperor's court, mentioning that they were the ancient king's court over 20,000 years ago, and that they were splitting the skies in this age. Listening to him speak till the end, the sea race's elites all had different expressions. In Ling Han's description, there was a start and a finish, a reason with basis, and the details could be deliberated. It was extremely likely that the truth was so, but that was too terrifying. The Divine Realm actually wanted to refine the entire vast land's living beings into a medicinal pill. Absolutely terrifying. No wonder. After this lord advanced into the Shattering Void tier 2,000 years ago, he always felt that shattering the void was too dangerous, previously always thinking that it was due to insufficient strength and being unable to break open the sky. If the truth is so, then no wonder. Then the clan men that shattered the void before, did they all die? If the truth is so, they were definitely eliminated by the Great Formation. Everyone was apathetic. In reality, every Shattering Void tier elite would feel danger when they wanted to shatter the void, but previously, they'd thought that it was due to their own insufficient strength and that there indeed were people who ascended to the Divine Realm but just haven't contacted them ever since. Previously, they thought that the two realms were hard to go through, so there was no news transmitted. But now, thinking again, if they died halfway on the road, there also wouldn't be any news transmitted. Helion Rong's expression was stern as he asked Ling Han, "Is splitting open the skies the only way? If father-in-law has the confidence to barge past that heaven-locking formation, he could try to shatter the void, but as far as I know, even Mountain River Tier's small extreme one can't rival the Great Formation," Ling Han said. Yes, Mountain River Tier? Divine Realms levels? Everyone was curious. Ling Han decided he might as well reiterate the information he'd heard from Yi Shuang. Of course, it was only about the Divine Being's tier differentiation, and there was no mention of the Underworld's war with the Divine Realm that went on for hundreds of millions of years. After shattering Void Tier elites broke open the Void, they wouldn't immediately become gods and simply enter the Divine Realm, because the Divine Realm's environment was necessary to become a god. However, the Divine Realm's 5 sects jammed this crucial passage and laid out a killing formation that could kill even those at the Mountain River Tier small extreme. It truly was killing whomever that could, no matter how exceeding your talents. Could you surpass the threshold between divine beings and the shattering Void Tier? Even Yi Shuang, who was a divine being, didn't dare to break through, not to mention the other people. Since it was impossible to break through forcibly, and staying would only result in being refined into a medicinal pill, as shattering Void Tier elites, the apex existence in this world, none of them was willing to await death, and they began to discuss vigorously about splitting open the skies. They formed a consensus that relying on Helion royal family alone wouldn't be enough, and that it was necessary to unite all possible unifiable power, in short, the east, south, west, and north regions of the sea. Thus, it also became very essential to resolve the grievances with the Xianyu clan. However, who would be the boss was another matter, and if splitting open the skies was successful, then how glorious would it be to be the executor of this grand endeavor? It would definitely be a good reputation lasting for generations, and a name that would go down in the annals of history. They didn't know the other benefits of splitting open the skies, for example, being able to receive the heaven's fortune blessing. However, the power of the nation alone could increase battle prowess and speed up cultivation, and such benefits already had people envious. However, it was unknown how long it would be before the 4 seas reached a consensus. It could be discussed slowly, and Ling Han was in less of a rush by that time. He should have advanced to the shattering Void Tier. Except for unfathomable guys like Ma Duo Bao, Ling Han had the confidence to suppress everyone. Helion Rong immediately sent out an important figure in the clan that brought his personally written letter to the Xianyu family, mentioning somewhat about the truth of the settling. Xianyu family wrote back very soon and agreed to sit down to discuss properly, but they demanded that Ling Han be brought along. Chapter 785. Hurry up and give birth to another one. Ling Han hesitated slightly, then nodded in agreement. First of all, battle prowess below shattering Void Tier 7 stars couldn't harm him at all, and elites above that were rare, pitifully few. Even An was Helion Rong just for looks. Helion Rong had the cultivation of the 9th layer of the shattering Void Tier, his battle prowess even reaching 10 stars. He was an expert, ranking in the top 3 in the North Sea alongside with Xianyu family's head. It was hard to tell who was better. However, Wenren family's Wenren Jie definitely ranked first. Although he was also in the 9th layer of the shattering Void Tier, his battle prowess was a shocking 11 stars. 1 star was a world's difference. Even if Xianyu Tong and Helion Rong joined hands, they would barely be able to rival Wenren Jie. And the Wenren family's shattering Void Tier elite strength was clearly a notch higher than the other 2 royal families, forcing the alliance of the 2 royal families for self-defense. Xianyu royal family's ancestral grounds were also on a massive island called Silent Star Island, which was strangely far from Dome Cloud Island. Even shattering Void Tier elites needed to travel for several days to get there. Helion Rong brought 9 shattering Void Tier elites from the clan along with Ling Han, Helion Sun Shui, and Hu Nu, and hastened towards Silent Star Island. They weren't constantly on the road. After traveling for 3 days, they stopped at a desolate island to rest, taking out all sorts of food to eat. This was obviously due to Hu Nyo's fervent demand. When fighting, Nyo would accompany, but not eating, nope. Even Helion Rong and the others were profuse in praise with the food inside Black Tower. It was delicacies that even the Celestials would drool over, especially when all sorts of precious medicinal ingredients were added like Mariety's treasured pearl. Just how many were there in the vast lands? Even the Hellion royal family couldn't take it out. After all, every 10,000 years was the settling, and living beings became extinct except for living spirits inside mystery realms, so how many could survive? This boy's a true genius. Hellion Rong carried Ling Jian Shui in his arms, his brows smoothing out, feeling greatly at ease. Ling Han still appropriately revealed some of his trump cards. For example, a spirit tool that could accommodate living things. It was also something very rare in the divine realm, but it wasn't the one and only, so he dared to reveal it. However, only those he trusted most knew the Black Tower wasn't something as simple as a spatial divine tool. Ling Jiangshu was already half a year old, and his brute force already progressed to the gushing spring tier, absolutely astonishing. When he became a little older and opened a spirit base to cultivate, his brute force would probably advance to the flower blossom tier. The height of his starting point was extremely shocking. His ancestral blood was too pure and thick. Even Hellion Sun Shui's was nowhere near. The Sea race regarded bloodline most highly, giving Hellion Rong the urge to make Ling Jian Shui the next head of the clan. Of course, this also had to do with Ling Han's willingness to exhaust resources on his son. The Moriarty's treasured pearl, 10th tier spiritual liquid, and whatnot, this kid showered in these things every day, so if his physique wasn't formidable, then there'd be no logic in the world. The prerequisite was obviously that Ling Jian Shui was able to endure such medicinal power. Even if it were another person with the same dad, they wouldn't be able to enjoy this fortune. Ling Han, Sun Shui is my clan's most resplendent pearl. Your son has to inherit the Hellion clan and be surnamed Hellion. Hellion Rong decided to rob him of the child, who was just too outstanding. Ling Han shook his head in a hurry and said, "This is my first child, and obviously has to be surnamed Ling. This king already betrothed our clan's most resplendent pearl to you, so shouldn't I ask for a grandson?" Hellion Rong said unabashedly. This was a super genius, who would definitely surpass the predecessors, possibly even reaching the height of the imperial family. So he had to contest till the end. The Hellion family has many men, clansmen in the 10,000s, and my Ling family only has me, the only child. You have the audacity to contest with me? Not doing it. Ling Han gave a meaningful glance, making Hellion Sun Shui use breastfeeding as an excuse to take his son back. Hellion Rong couldn't help but sigh. A grown girl couldn't be kept at home. Once married off, she belonged to someone else, favoring an outsider way too quickly. He was willing to give up, and said, "Then before 500 years old, this child stays in the family. After all, my family has solid accumulations that can give the child the best growth conditions. Besides, this king is also worried that Sun Shui lacks milk, treating the child insufficiently." Hellion Sun Shui stared agape. Was this still her father related by blood and flesh? For the sake of snatching a child, even his own daughter became a target of attack? My breasts are a bit small, but would it go so far as to starve my son? Ling Han snickered, taking out all sorts of precious treasures. With each item he took out, Hellion Rong's face twitched. Some of those treasures Hellion family had, but their amount wasn't that terrifying. Look, 1,000-year-old ginseng was counted by baskets. How could it be compared? The Moriarty's treasured pearl and 10th tier spirit liquid were something even Hellion clan couldn't offer up. An utter defeat. Hellion Rong was speechless. Speaking of raising children, following Ling Han was definitely better. One clan couldn't compare to one person. Hellion Rong felt immense pressure, and the gloominess in his heart was even greater. Trying every possible way, he still made Ling Han agree to have the second child that Hellion Sun Shui gave birth to be passed on to the Hellion family. The old fellow was truly extremely proactive, and without even finishing eating, he egged on Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui to rest, to keep plowing for the next generation, driving Hellion Sun Shui absolutely mad. After another 5 days, the Silent Star Island was finally within view. Xiao, a figure flew out and blocked their path. It was a martial artist with a pair of bird wings on the back. His feet were like duck feet with webs, while his mouth was flat and stuck out, appearing extremely hilarious. However, Hellion Rong and the others had no trace of a smile on their faces. To them, the more atavistic the appearance of people who possess divine beasts' blood, the purer their bloodline, and the greater their advantage in martial arts cultivation. For example, one who was birthed in the form of a dragon would only need to grow without cultivating, and after maturity, they would be the strongest true dragon in the world, at least in the vast lands. Ha 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 ha. Hu Niu, however, couldn't bear it, laughing loudly as she said, Ling Han, do you think this duck is better eaten stewed or roasted? With that said, Helian Rong and the others cried out, not good, inwardly. This man wasn't of the normal sea race, but a fierce general under Xianyu royal family, named Obuluo, a dignified Shattering Void tier elite. At the moment, the old grievances with Xianyu clan hadn't been resolved, yet you were freaking ridiculing their general. Was this not causing more trouble? As expected, Obuluo revealed a furious expression and said, very well, so it turns out Lord Helian and his company want to eat this general. He, she misspoke. General O is a valiant general under Xianyu King. Who dares to disrespect General O? Helian Rong said indifferently. His position was above Obuluo, and even if he interceded on behalf of Hu Niu, his manner was still imposing. Obuluo obviously wouldn't fuss about a little girl, since he would be the only one to lose face. He swung his hands and said, the king has waited respectfully for many days, please come. His gaze swept by Ling Han, carrying a chill. Chapter 786. Block 10 Moves. Ling Han killed Xianyu Cheng and Xianyu Dongming by executing them publicly, an act which was a great humiliation to the Xianyu royal family. Every single one of them hated Ling Han to the bones, viewing him as a mortal enemy. Now that this mortal enemy appeared, it would be strange if Obuluo still had a pleasant expression on his face. The party landed on the island. The inhabitants here were either Xianyu royal family, or the royal family subordinate forces, so their strength was considerably out of the ordinary. However, no matter how extraordinary, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly in front of Shattering Void tier elites. As Ling Han and the others walked by, everyone trembled with fear, barely being able to stand. Under the guidance of Obuluo, they arrived at Xianyu clan's royal palace. Although they were also called royal families, they didn't establish a nation, and simply corresponded as the three great royal families. This was the same as the Ao family king of the Four Seas, called an imperial clan, yet they didn't establish a nation and simply kept watch and regulated, being respected by the Four Seas. Lord Helian, Xianyu royal family's head, Xianyu Tong greeted. His figure was very lanky, but he didn't have the lumps on top of his head like Helian Rong did. Instead, one of his hands was covered with scales, and his palm was also completely different from normal person, like a dragon's claw. The royal families all had true dragon's blood, the difference being the purity, but normally, dragon horns were the external characteristic, and to grow a dragon claw like his was very, very rare. Apparently, the fact that Xianyu Tong could become the Xianyu royal family's leader was inseparable from this dragon claw, which bestowed him with a strong power of the bloodline, allowing him to become one of the three supreme elites in the North Sea. However, only when he and Helian Rong got together could they rival one Rinjia, whose strength was truly too powerful and unmeasurable. Lord Xianyu. Helian Rong cupped his hands in obeisance. This human is the murderer that killed this king's son? Xianyu Tong stared at Ling Han with an extremely unfriendly expression. This was natural. The hatred of killing his son was absolutely irreconcilable. Lord Xianyu, saying this from the start seems somewhat inappropriate? Helian Rong said indifferently. Xianyu Tong snorted and said, the matter you talked about had better not be the least bit false, or else this king will kill this child at all cost. Lord Xianyu, you think that this king would joke about this sort of matter? Helian Rong said with a smile. Then please go inside. Xianyu Tong gesticulated for him to go in, his attitude still cold. Everyone entered the hall. As the settling was too grave an issue, miscellaneous personnel obviously had no right to listen. The hall not only had Shattering Void tier elites, but also a great defensive formation activated, tightly covering the entire island. Ling Han spoke again of the Divine Realm's 5-sex plan and answered the inquiries of the Xianyu royal family, making their faces gloomier, the same reaction that Helian royal family had previously. From shock to unacceptable, then slowly to acceptance and numbness. Such great news was hard to bear even for Shattering Void tier elites. But unfortunately for them, they all believed it. Because this could completely explain the gap in history, and why they always felt an indescribable sense of danger when they thought to shatter the void. Xianyu Tong tapped his finger on the table, and said, Lord Helian, you want to form an alliance? Fine, but this king has a condition. What condition? Helian Rong asked. Shen Yutong pointed at Ling Han and said, "This human's head." "No." Helian Rong refused flatly. Not to mention Ling Han's personal potential, he still counted on Ling Han and Helian Sun Shui to produce one more offspring, one that had even purer ancestral blood, bringing Helian royal family to a greater height, even surpassing the imperial family. "A mere human." Shen Yutong snorted. "Lord Helian, you'd better consider carefully. Are you really going to destroy our alliance for a human ant?" "Hee, you say it like if you tried, I would die," Ling Han interrupted. Helian Rong laughed and said, "How about this? Lord Shen Yu can send out an expert, and within an amount of restricted moves, this king will definitely not intervene to assist, but after these moves, all grievances are settled." "Father!" Helian Sun Shui cried out in a hurry, but it was obviously fake for Shen Yutong to see. However, women naturally knew how to act, and the frightened look on her face really didn't seem fake. Helian Rong waved his hand, signaling that Helian Sun Shui needed not speak more. Shen Yutong couldn't help but be shocked. This human's tier couldn't be more obvious, merely at the 5th layer of the deity transformation tier, which meant he had at most battle prowess of heaven tier. In front of shattering void tier elites, a heaven tier 1 could only nurse a grievance no matter how strong he were, so what were they playing at? Could Helian Rong have decided to sacrifice this human in order to form an alliance with him? Of course, he was but a lowly human, so what if he died? Shen Yutong was still unsatisfied. Killing Ling Han would only avenge his son, but Helian Sun Shui escaping marriage embarrassed Shen Yu royal family, so was this debt going to be written off just like that? It definitely couldn't. Okay, then 10 moves. Shen Yutong nodded. Anyway, they could kill this human first, and then slowly bargain with Helian Rong. In short, Shen Yu family definitely couldn't lose out. With shattering void tier elite intervening, one move should be enough to settle it, so why set 10 moves as the limit? It was obviously to let Ling Han suffer as much as possible, and then kill Ling Han with the last move. He sent someone to notify the people of the entire island to head towards the Iron Blood Stadium. This human dared to kill the people of the Shen Yu clan, and if he weren't executed in public, how could they be mollified? The Iron Blood Stadium was used for battle. Not only were the materials used to construct it extremely durable, but also was there a large formation set up that could withstand the battle impact of about shattering void tier 5 stars, being especially made for fights. In the battle, martial artists were able to improve themselves, and observing the fights of elites was also extremely beneficial, so the Iron Blood Stadium had many seats, enough to accommodate 10,000 people. Ordinarily, there were even bets on fights, with great wins and losses. Ling Han, Shen Yutong, Helian Rong and the others all came here. Ling Han pretended to face death calmly, making the people of Helian clan sneer. "We'll see how long you can maintain such calmness. Wait till you cry for mercy." Helian Rong knew very well in his heart that he'd already tied up Shen Yutong with his words earlier and that Shen Yutong wouldn't intervene. So who else in Shen Yu royal family could still harm Ling Han? Besides, who would think that Ling Han was also a formation master? Shen Yutong nodded towards someone, and said, "Ziyuan, you go. You must kill this child in 10 moves." That person nodded and said, "Brother King, I understand." This person was called Shen Yu Ziyuan, and he was Shen Yutong's brother, a 5th layer shattering void tier elite, whose battle prowess also reached 5 stars. "Take the field," Shen Yutong said to Ling Han coldly. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "I only need to block 10 moves." *T. What do you mean, only need to block 10 moves? Could you even block 1 move? The people in the surroundings sneered. "You can talk glibly for now. Soon you'll be crying for mercy." Chapter 787. Humans also have such physiques. Correct, you only need to block 10 moves. Shen Yutong said coldly. He swept a glance at Helian Rong, meaning, you mustn't intervene, or else this bet won't count. Helian Rong simply smiled faintly with a calm expression, not seeming to care at all about Ling Han's survival. However, he was full of smiles on the inside. Previously, Helian family was duped by Ling Han, and this time, it was finally Shen Yutong's turn to have a taste. Although he was one of the strongest elites in power, unswayed by emotions for a long time. Imagining his old rival's shocked look later, he couldn't help but want to laugh. Thinking about it was joyous, really looked forward to it. Go down, Xianyu Tong urged. Entering Xianyu family's territory, you still want to overturn the skies. Ling Han assumed an expression of facing death calmly, and walked with large strides into the battle area. The ground was made of strange stones, which was said to be produced at the bottom of the sea, and although it couldn't be forged into weapons, it was extremely hard, and its toughness reached 9th-tier rare metals. On top of formations, its defensive power could rival 10th-tier rare metals. Instantly, waves of hissing sounds came from the stands. This was the offender that humiliated Xianyu royal family, and today he was going to be punished here. Now everyone obviously knew that Ling Han was going to receive Xianyu Ziyuan's 10 moves. On the surface, it was a battle, but in reality, wasn't it a sadistic punishment? Xianyu Ziyuan possessed Shattering Void Tier 5 stars of battle prowess, and could kill Ling Han instantly with one move. Some people not only hissed, but also threw all sorts of garbage, but being blocked by the formation, the garbage slid to the side of the field still. Their attitude was shown to the greatest extent. Hurry up and die. Ling Han looked towards Xianyu Ziyuan. He was a somewhat old middle-aged man who looked to be in the 50s, and in terms of the long lives of true dragon's descendants, he lived roughly for 2,000 years, which counted as super old. A human Shattering Void Tier elite would have already lived 2 lifetimes, but he only passed half of one, something truly enviable. It couldn't be helped, true dragon's blood circulated within his body. Human, if you can take this lord's 10 moves, then you can leave here alive. Xianyu Ziyuan revealed a ruthless expression. Originally, he felt it beneath him to attack a mere deity transformation tier ant considering his status, but Ling Han dared to execute people of Xianyu family in public, one of whom even had extremely pure ancestral blood, being the next successor to the king. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Then will this lord please have mercy?" "This lord will." Xianyu Ziyuan sneered. He'd indeed pull punches in the first 9 moves, and when Ling Han saw a tiny bit of hope, he would then mercilessly smother it, the only way to truly vent their hatred. "Commence your moves." Ling Han gesticulated. Xianyu Ziyuan clenched his fists and didn't even operate origin power. With Axiu, he charged over and threw a punch at Ling Han. How extremely fast were the speeds of Shattering Void Tier. There was no time for Ling Han to react at all. This punch hit him right on the pit of his stomach. Pong! He was instantly sent flying like an artillery shell. Ling Han fell heavily into the stone wall at the end of the battlefield, and then bounced back, falling to the ground. Even though he was actually prepared, he still felt a stinging pain in the pit of his stomach. He indeed couldn't dodge a Shattering Void Tier's attack, but the Eye of Truth could see how powerful the attack was. Xianyu Ziyuan evidently wanted him to suffer the greatest extent of the 10 moves. Thus he controlled the first attack's power at Heaven Tier 10 stars of battle prowess, and it was fired out with pure brute force. This originally wasn't enough to harm Ling Han, but the opponent was at the Shattering Void Tier, thoughtlessly adhering a shred of martial intent, which was the source of Ling Han's pain. His physique was too formidable. Sure, it was painful, but it wasn't a big deal. He immediately climbed up, coughed up a mouthful of black blood, and then exercised his muscles and bones. Instantly, the bones all over his body crackled, and his chi and blood soared, showing his extremely vigorous life force. Instantly, those on stands raised a commotion. The sea race counted as people half human half beast, so their physiques were considerably formidable, like those of the lobstermen and crabmen. Their shells alone could make martial artists in the same tier despair, being absolutely impenetrable. However, their attainments were also limited, reaching the deity transformation tier at most as they were greatly limited by their bloodline. Precisely because of this, they also knew just how difficult it was to get their physiques to the Heaven and Shattering Void tier. This human did it. It was too shocking. Are you sure you're a pure human, and not some half-human descended from divine beasts? Even Xianyu Tong's eyes contracted slightly as he revealed a look of pity. It wasn't rare for sea races kings one to possess such physique. Their bloodlines bestowed them with such abilities. However, it was surprising for a human to reach such heights, showing the terrifying potential of this human. Humans had the worst physical composition and the weakest physiques, but they had infinite possibilities in martial arts because they didn't have the blessing of bloodlines and in turn wouldn't be limited by bloodlines. How unfortunate that this human killed his son. Otherwise, this human was really worth recruiting. Even marrying to a girl of his clan, their offspring might also be extremely formidable. This thought only flashed across his mind. No way, this human must die. Besides, they already entered the Iron Blood Stadium, so even he couldn't stop the fight, or else he'd be going back on his words, and how could he keep his position as king then? Xianyu Ziyuan was also slightly shocked. He obviously knew very clearly how much power he'd used, enough to heavily injure 99% of peak stage heaven tier warriors. But Ling Han simply coughed a mouthful of blood and that was all. The vigor of Ling Han's blood and qi even made him somewhat dumbfounded. The second move, he said indifferently, raising his right fist again, and increased the power to heaven tier 12 stars. Xiao, he flew out and threw a punch, sending Ling Han flying again. Wah! Ling Han hacked out another mouthful of black blood. He lowered his head and saw that his chest caved in somewhat and all his bones were broken. After adhering the martial intent of a shattering void tier, the mere battle power of heaven tier could injure his physique, truly surprising. It could also be seen that the strength of the shattering void tier crushed heaven tier by countless times. Ling Han frowned slightly with a shred of shattering void tier's martial intent. Diamond body couldn't automatically heal the injuries. He operated indestructible heaven scroll, and his entire body instantly glowed with golden light, emitting an ancient and noble presence as if that of an ancient heavenly emperor. His broken bones recovered at a visible speed, and almost in the time of a breath, he recovered to an optimal state, without any damages to qi and blood, his vitality exuberant. Although Ling Han already stopped indestructible heaven scroll, but the shattering void tier elites all revealed shocked expressions one after another. That ancient and noble presence made their souls tremble with fear. How was it possible he was a mere human, not a true dragon's reincarnation? Why could he suppress them in terms of the quality of the soul? 8 more moves, Ling Han said indifferently. Chapter 788. Comprehending Sword Heart. Ling Han didn't immediately use Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, mainly because he wanted to improve himself using a shattering void tier elite. He always felt that his cultivation improved too fast, for he was eating honestly too much high-level medicinal pills and all sorts of worldly treasures, which settled in his body, and if he didn't stimulate and refine it, it would actually bring about the opposite effect. Taking 2 heavy consecutive hits and even resisting a shattering void tier's martial intent, he already felt the medicinal power that settled in his body slowly being set off and quickly converting into his own origin power. More of the medicinal power nourished his flesh, improving his brute force, an extremely soothing thing. He couldn't help but reveal an intoxicated expression. Now that his qi and blood and medicinal power was completely stimulated, it was as if countless small hands massaging him all over his body, truly a very wonderful feeling. Seeing this, Xianyu Ziyuan couldn't help but reveal a furious look. I'm torturing you, yet you're revealing an expression of pleasure. What do you mean, am I attacking too lightly? He was also shocked by Ling Han's physique and its recovery ability, but didn't take it to mind, because Ling Han couldn't surpass the shattering void tier threshold no matter how freakish he was. This was the truth of martial arts. The third move. Xianyu Ziyuan threw a third punch. Not in the least unexpectedly, Ling Han was sent flying and hacked out blood, even breaking his bones. However, he stood up, connected his bones, and recovered, the speed of which was surprising, making even the Octopus clan, who were known for their powerful recovery ability, feel inferior. How could there be such a freak? The fourth move. The fifth move. The sixth move. Xianyu Ziyuan didn't throw a punch and stop for a while, and instead threw 3 consecutive punches, with each punch's power increasing, heavily injuring Ling Han. This time, Ling Han lay on the ground for a good while before standing up. 3 shocking massive indentations were in his chest, a ghastly sight to see, but after a short while, these indentations were recovering. His entire body emitted golden light, supreme like a heavenly emperor descending to earth. Pa pa pa. His body emitted explosive sounds as his presence suddenly began to skyrocket, just as if a volcano suddenly erupting. He broke through. The shattering void tier elites cried out one after another, their expressions full of disbelief. T. Have you guys ever seen a freak who can break through while being beaten? And it wasn't as simple as taking a beating. It was tormenting, being heavily injured to the point of broken bones. To break through under such conditions is absolutely unbelievable. However, the reality was plain to see. This human advanced from the 5th layer of the deity transformation tier to the 6th layer. Ling Han couldn't help but be depressed. He was already annoyed that his tier progressed too quickly and wanted to borrow the hand of a shattering void tier elite to toughen himself, solidifying his tier. But, unexpectedly, after being hit by 6 punches, the medicinal power that accumulated within his body was set off, instantly allowing him to complete the breakthrough. With reason, it was equivalent to him taking an exceptional treasured medicine, and then having a shattering void tier elite dissolve the medicinal power. How could the improvement not be fast? However, when the other people looked at his gloomy expression, every one of them was driven mad. After being able to break through while being tormented by a shattering void tier elite, you're still not pleased. Fuck, too pretentious, you should be struck by lightning. Xianyu Ziyuan frowned slightly. He'd originally intended to beat Ling Han black and blue with 9 punches till the last gasp, and then end Ling Han's life with the last attack, but after 6 punches, Ling Han was not only not on the verge of death, but rather brimming with energy, even breaking through, making him quite gloomy. He raised his fist for the 7th time, and this time, he was finally somewhat serious, operating origin power as veined patterns intertwined on his fist. Previously, although he used a shred of martial intent that was passive, unconsciously added in, compared to actively operating it, it really was too different. Shattering void tier elites were able to shatter stars with 1 punch. How terrifying were such beings? He was going to heavily injure Ling Han. Ling Han's heart constricted involuntarily as he felt immense pressure. A shattering void tier elite was about to get serious. Although not unleashing all his strength, it still made his entire body feel chills, like falling into an ice cave. Should Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation be used? Ling Han only hesitated for an instant before deciding to endure a little longer. This attack definitely couldn't take his life, and he could still endure a little longer to stimulate the medicinal power within his body. Borrowing the hand of a shattering void tier elite to prompt the medicinal power wasn't easy to come by. Xianyu Ziyuan attacked. At this moment, he truly displayed a shattering void tier elite's might, and with the punch, even heaven and earth were eclipsed, and only that punch seemed to be eternity. Ling Han was sent flying. Half the bones in his entire body broke, above 90% of his skin cracked. His entire dripping wet with blood, and even his consciousness was blurring. Too strong, too strong. This was what shattering void tier was. Ling Han had experienced such battle prowess. However, although he came to grips with Corpse Boss, the Revere Life Sword was what truly opposed the shattering void tier battle prowess, and he didn't participate, so only now did he finally have a personal understanding. It truly made him extremely nervous and his entire body feel chills, but under such circumstances, his fighting spirit was instead blazing like a fire. His 10 fingers flicked gently, with sword rays lighting up, and under such heavy injuries, he actually began to comprehend the sword path. Sword heart was what he pursued. In the previous life, although he had trained with swords, he couldn't even cultivate out a single flash of sword chi, never considering to become a king amongst martial artists from the start. Was the status of an alchemy emperor not impressive enough? If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't suppress Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, he wouldn't have searched for historic sites everywhere, seeking to become stronger to suppress this vicious person. In this lifetime, he only cultivated for a little over 5 years, and obviously couldn't compare to Su Xiaoran and Small Sword Emperor. They were accompanied by sabers and swords almost from the moment they were born, and with saber and sword masters imparting their genuine understandings upon them, both had completely different starting points. He only relied on himself. Under the condition of being heavily injured, Ling Han unexpectedly opened up the road to the sword path. He operated sword intent to resist the martial intent within his body, and improved his own sword path comprehension through such resistance. If he could cultivate out sword heart, his comprehension of Tao would obviously advance a whole lot and would barely be able to resist against a shattering void tier's martial intent. After all, sword heart was exclusive to the shattering void tier, level with the martial arts tier. Seeing this scene, almost everyone's faces twitched, being indescribably shocked. This brat actually borrowed a shattering void tier's power to comprehend Tao. This was already an unbelievable thing. More importantly, This human truly acquired substantial progress, and the sword rays flickered, but the presence they emitted became more terrifying. What the hell? Xianyu Ziyuan was also somewhat stupefied. This human was too nature-defying. No, he definitely couldn't be allowed to live any longer. Give him a few more years and it'll definitely be possible for him to threaten the Xianyu clan. He no longer had any reservations, extending his right hand but no longer clenching his fist, and instead turned it into a golden dragon claw. He was going to kill Ling Han in one hit, putting an end to future disaster. With a dragon's cry, he flew out and charged towards Ling Han. Now, this human was heavily injured and couldn't possibly resist. Go to hell. Chapter 789. Xianyu clan proposes. Xianyu Ziyuan was like a divine dragon, arriving magnificently, swinging his dragon claw right at Ling Han's heart. It was a dragon claw, which could claw a hole even in 10th tier rare metal. So what if this human's physique was formidable? However, at this moment, the temperature dropped drastically. White snow floated, and ice fragments fluttered. With True Dragon's cry, a completely icy white True Dragon surfaced, coiling above Ling Han, staring fiercely and emitting endless divine might. Pong! The ice dragon greeted Xianyu Ziyuan and swatted him flying, and then pounced over, tormenting him violently. Xianyu Ziyuan was very strong and had battle prowess of Shattering Void Tier 5 stars, but he couldn't withstand the ice dragon, which was even stronger, reaching Shattering Void Tier 7 stars. Within Shattering Void Tier, 1 star was a world's difference, so was 7 stars not enough to tyrannize 5 stars? Ah! Xianyu Ziyuan screamed, resisting desperately, yet still being riddled with cuts and bruises, and it had obviously long passed 10 moves. Except for Helian Rong and a few other people, everyone's mouths were wide open, being completely unable to accept this outcome. A comeback. This human made a comeback. He was clearly at the end of the line, but all of a sudden came up with a 180, violently tormenting Xianyu Ziyuan instead. It was too incredible, too unbelievable, and too hard to accept. The corner of Xianyu Tong's mouth twitched. He finally understood that Helian Rong really wasn't giving up on Ling Han, and instead he knew that Ling Han possessed such a shocking trump card. No wonder this guy wittingly hitched him with words, not letting him personally intervene, because this ice dragon's battle prowess surpassed 5 stars, but definitely didn't reach 10 stars. If he attacked, there was still a possibility that Ling Han would be killed in 10 moves. Old fox. Got fucking played. Enough. He waved his hand and reached his hand right in, sending the ice dragon flying with a gentle shake of the fist, and then he grabbed Xianyu Ziyuan to take him out, then stared fiercely at Helian Rong, and said, "Arrange for the honored guests to rest first, this king has to treat Ziyuan's injuries." Treating injuries was an excuse. Was mainly to figure out how to end things. How could Xianyu family's 2 most important figures die for nothing? However, the bet was already carried out publicly, and after 10 moves, all grievances were settled, so how could he go back on his word? If Ling Han was alone, then reneging wouldn't matter to a dignified North Sea royal family. What were you going to do, bite me? But now Helian Rong was present, and if this were to be propagated exaggeratedly, would Xianyu royal family have any face left? Ling Han didn't stand up and didn't retract Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. He just sat under the protection of this formation, opposing the Shattering Void Tier intent in his body and toughening his sword intent. This was actually very dangerous. Any carelessness could result in his divine sense being destroyed by this intent, and Black Tower truly couldn't save him then. However, a genius and a lunatic were only separated by a thread, and if he thought that this was a good opportunity, he would continue resolutely. Su Xiao Ran and Small Sword Emperor grasped Saber Heart and Sword Heart, respectively, and this gave him great pressure and also made him reluctant to concede, giving him the sense of urgency to grasp Sword Heart as soon as possible. 1 day, 2 days, 10 days, 1 month. He resisted the intent within his body with great difficulty. The Shattering Void Tier too strong, and its martial intent could exist for several hundred years. Over this 1 month, the intent almost destroyed 99% of Ling Han's body. Even his heart almost stopped beating, and now only the consciousness remained as Ling Han's territory. He couldn't move his hands and feet at all now, because the conscious connection was severed as if they belonged to someone else, and once his consciousness was also taken, he would be a dead man. The small man formed by the spiritual infant kept watch over the sea of consciousness, forming hand seals, deriving various mystical powers, and resisting the invasion of the shattering void tier will. The sword intent within Ling Han's body became more and more intense, and within the Black Tower, the Revere Life Sword vibrated gently as veined patterns lit up one by one. Xiao. He suddenly opened his eyes and stood up abruptly. The golden light within his body spread out, and that was indestructible heaven's scroll finally starting to circulate, expelling the shattering void tier's will. Falling a little short, he exclaimed after indistinctly coming in contact with edge of sword heart, but still remaining separated by a layer of film that just couldn't be pierced through. Perhaps tomorrow, or even the next instant, he would be able to comprehend it, and perhaps he would be unable to succeed in this lifetime with such with enlightenment. Hurry and put away the formation. Shen Yutong's voice sounded. How many days have you occupied the Iron Blood Stadium? Ling Han was startled. Although Shen Yutong was berating him, there was no longer the killing intent that were in his words earlier. Could it be that Shen Yutong really kept his promise and let go of the hatred of killing his son? Strange, it was hard to believe. Put it away. Do you really think that if Lord Shen Yu wanted to kill you, this formation could protect you? Helian Rong's voice transmitted over. Ling Han snickered and stored away the formation. He thought that if it really came down to a desperate and all-out fight, he had Black Tower, and killing a shattering void tier would be as easy as a palm's turn, but this would attract true powerhouses, and even he would suffer disaster. Human, as long as you can agree to this king's one condition, this king can let bygones be bygones, settling all grievances, Shen Yutong said. Ling Han scratched his head and said, I won the bet, so shouldn't all grievances be settled? Shen Yutong snorted and said, You've killed 2 people of Shen Yu family, but won bet, which can only cancel out the hatred of one person. T. Could you be more shameless? Ling Han was struck dumb. It turned out shattering void tier elites could also be so shameless. However, Shen Yutong no longer had killing intent in his swords, and Helian Rong also seemed relaxed. Could the 2 old foxes have reached some sort of agreement in the month that he wasn't present? He muttered to himself irresolutely and said, What's this lord's condition? Marry a girl of this clan and have an offspring. The enmity will be settled then. Shen Yutong said indifferently. Of course, this child must belong to my clan. You've killed one of my clan's geniuses, so you obviously have to return one. Could it be counted like that? Ling Han couldn't help but look towards Helian Rong. It must have been leaked by you, or else why would Shen Yutong want him to be a mating pig? What exactly was this father-in-law? A pimp? Being stared at Ling Han like that, Helian Rong's face couldn't help but blush slightly, and he explained, This king's mouth slipped after he was drunk. He received a grandson with amazing talent and couldn't help but show off, while Shen Yutong read his own meaning into it and associated it with Ling Han's freakishness. Shen Yutong had a bright idea right away. What if Ling Han could also leave a descendant for the Shen Yu family? As a result, they ran over immediately when they discovered Ling Han had awakened. I don't agree. Ling Han shook his head. He hadn't the least bit of quality of a mating pig and definitely wouldn't marry a stranger to resolve grievances. Besides, was that girl willing to marry him? Forcibly matching 2 complete strangers, wasn't that just a cause for trouble? Human, could you be afraid that the girl who will marry you is ugly? Shen Yutong snickered. Don't worry. It's one of the pearls of my clan, the 7th brother's only beloved daughter called Shen Yu Kai. Not only is she beautiful like a flower, but her ancestral blood is also extremely pure. She can rank in the top 3 in the younger generation. Humph, I won't marry this human even if I die. At this moment, a girl appeared in the distance, holding a shining treasure sword. Whoever forces me to marry him, either he dies or I die. Chapter 790. 2 Choices. This girl was obviously Shen Yu Kai. Shen Yutong didn't exaggerate. This girl's appearance indeed was extremely beautiful, no inferior to Helian Sun Shui at all, and her figure even better because her breasts were like billows, completely unlike Helion Sun Shui's flat stretch of land. Lord, nothing forcibly done is going to be agreeable. I have no intention and Lady Xianyu has no heart, so why forcibly match us together? Ling Han said indifferently. Xianyu Tong snorted and said, an important matter like marriage, how could juniors decide it for themselves? Xianyu Kai didn't dare to be rude towards Xianyu Tong. She simply stared at Ling Han and said, if you dare to agree, you'll never hear the end of it. With that said, she leapt away, leaving only a beautiful view of her back. Ling Han smiled and said, this lord can decide a great event like Lady Xianyu's marriage, but as for me, sorry. Xianyu Tong's expression turned cold, and he said, Ling Han, have you weighed the pros and cons? If you agree, not only can you take a wife as beautiful as flower and jade, even Xianyu royal family's power can be used for you to a certain limit. This king knows that you established a king's court, and Middle State's 5 great sects definitely view you as a thorn in their side, but if you receive the support of our clan, you will have nothing to fear. And what you have to pay is almost nothing. Such a deal with steady gains and no losses, you're actually going to reject. Ling Han sighed and said, your lord will only be disappointed, I still choose to refuse. Xianyu Tong stared at Ling Han for an entire 10 breaths time, and then suddenly laughed loudly and said, good. Although this king is somewhat disappointed, he's also somewhat impressed. There aren't many people now who can uphold their principles. Ling Han smiled and said, then what will your lordship do next? Obviously allow you and Kair more contact. Youngsters, you see, will naturally become more intimate after understanding and communicating more, Xianyu Tong said. He still hasn't given up on the idea? Ling Han didn't say any more. He wasn't one to be easily swayed. Xianyu Tong changed the topic, and said, it's not impossible to want to form an alliance and iron out grievances. This king indeed can change a condition as long as you obtain something for this king. What thing? Ling Han asked. It was obvious that this thing definitely wasn't ordinary, or else why would Xianyu Tong suggest it? There are still 10 days before Ghostly Dragon Cave opens. Xianyu Tong said. The teeth of a true dragon. Helion Rong immediately cried out. Xianyu Tong didn't find it strange the other saw through him. The Ghostly Dragon Cave wasn't some secret in the North Sea. How could Helion Rong not have guessed? He said, that's right, the teeth of a true dragon. As long as you can obtain this item for this king, not only will all grievances be settled, this king will also give you a great reward. Helion Rong, however, looked stern and said, the teeth of a true dragon are in the 4th layer of the Ghostly Dragon Cave, and almost all those who set foot there don't come out alive. Even if there are a few lucky people that do, they die soon after they come out. There's clearly an easy and effortless path to take. This brat doesn't want it, then he can be given the difficult one, Xianyu Tong said with a smile. This king will say it again, if you take Kair, not only will all grievances be settled, the matter of the alliance can also be immediately settled. You take your time to consider carefully. Xianyu Tong swung his sleeves, turned, and left. He wasn't worried about Ling Han running, or else Ling Han might as well not have come. The matter of the alliance was the difficult problem that had Ling Han by the neck. Ling Han was curious and said, Father-in-law, what sort of place is that Ghostly Dragon Cave? Helion Rong revealed a look of reverence, and said, a North Seas Dragon Clan powerhouse, their identity lost with the gaps in history, died an unknown amount of years ago, and his body turned into Ghostly Dragon Cave. This powerhouse was truly powerful. His blood, flesh, and bones evolved into surprising spiritual medicine, but there are also terrifying beasts nearby at the same time. Ghostly Dragon Cave is a place full of treasures, but at the same time an extremely dangerous one. That powerful? Ling Han blurted out. According to the legends, this powerhouse possessed shattering void tier 20 stars of battle prowess, standing at the absolute peak of humanity. Even divine beings descending into this realm couldn't rival him, so that's why strange phenomenon came into being, his body turning into a mystery realm, remaining undestroyed for hundreds of millions of years, Helion Rong said, full of reverence. He might also have shattering void tier 10 stars of battle prowess, but it was incomparable to that old dragon's prowess. This powerhouse was one step short of becoming a true dragon, unfortunately still lacking one last step, and could only be called an alternative dragon, Helian Rong said with deep pity. Previously, he didn't understand why such a powerful existence didn't become a god. But now he knew clearly that this powerhouse was too powerful, enduring through the settling, and even the divine beings that descended couldn't kill him. Yet, the powerhouse didn't dare to shatter the void, and died of old age in the lower realm in the end. Lamentable. Lamentable. This strengthened his determination to split open the skies, or else he'd either be refined into a pill, or die of old age in the lower realm. There was no third possibility. So what's the matter with the teeth of a true dragon? Ling Han asked. The alternative dragon's entire body turned into ghostly dragon cave, and only a single dragon tooth was perfectly preserved, containing the endless power of a dragon, which is a supreme treasure for any true dragon's descendant. Helian Rong also became excited. Apparently, the tooth of a true dragon was also immensely attractive to him. Ling Han instantly felt a rush of excitement. His son had true dragon's blood, and if his son refined the tooth one of a true dragon, what heights would the little fellow be able to reach in the future? This deal was going to be done. He inquired Helian Rong about the details of Ghostly Dragon Cave, and Helian Rong didn't hold back a single bit, telling Ling Han everything he knew in full detail. The Ghostly Dragon Cave was located in the west of the North Sea, and couldn't be entered in normal times, because of the oppressive force of the alternative dragon even though it had died countless millennia ago. The alternative dragon was too powerful back then, and reached the allowable limit of the vast lands, being able to crush a large amount of shattering void tier elites even in death. Every 500 years, the Ghostly Dragon Cave would open once not for long, usually half a month or so. The cave was split into 4 layers, and each layer had a variety of spiritual medicine, all born from showering in the essence of the dragon and possessing shocking medicinal power. But at the same time, the alternative dragon's blood and flesh essence also induced the growth of many strange living spirits that were powerful yet limited by the alternative dragon's body they couldn't walk out. However, to harvest medicine inside, one would have to face these monsters, which translated into an extremely dangerous situation. Moreover, except for the true dragon's teeth, Ghostly Dragon Cave also had dragon's bloodgrass, which was a goodie only second to the true dragon's teeth. It had surprising effects on refining the physique and could therefore cultivate the body of a dragon from it. Very good. He also wanted dragon's bloodgrass for his son to refine, laying the most solid foundation as a child. He told Helian Sun Shui his decision, and Helian Sun Shui was obviously worried, and said, "The Ghostly Dragon Cave's first 3 layers are alright though dangerous, there's always a slim chance of survival. However, the 4th layer is extremely dangerous. Those who enter almost certainly die, and the few that escape would be heavily injured, dying before long." Ling Han nodded and said, "I'll weigh my abilities and act accordingly." Chapter 791. Wanren. The Ghostly Dragon Cave was going to open soon. Ling Han, Helian Rong, and the others all departed directly. They no longer had the time to return to the Helian clan to make arrangements. However, for a large clan like the Helian clan, they would naturally not be thrown into a mess just because of the departure of their clan king. They would definitely gather people to enter into the Ghostly Dragon Cave themselves. Xian Tong did not set out with them. He was the king of a royal clan, and so naturally would be leading his own team. They journeyed day and night. 5 days later, they finally arrived on a coastal island. From afar, it looked like a coiled true dragon, and stretched for as long as 100 miles, looking very majestic. This was the Ghostly Dragon Cave. The entrance lay on the eastern side of the island. The group landed, and saw that there was already a considerable number of people gathered here. These people were obviously from different groups, and kept a sizable distance among themselves. Helian Rong's gaze swept over, and he could not help but show a hint of wariness as he said, "Wanren is here." He was staring at a tall, broad-shouldered man. That man was filled with the forceful aura of a ruler, and seemed to be the center of the world merely standing there, without the need to deliberately unleash his aura. One would be able to easily distinguish him immediately from the masses. Wanren, the strongest elite of the North Sea, possessed the battle prowess of 11 battle stars of shattering void tier. Ling Han, too, cast a few looks at Wanren. On the surface, this person did not have a sliver of the identifying traits of the dragon race, but the purity of his bloodline was obviously superior to Helian Rong's and Xian Tong's. How astonishing the sensory abilities of a shattering void tier elite were. When Helion Rong's gaze paused on him, Wenren immediately raised his head and turned his eyes in Helion Rong's direction. His stare flickered with killing intent as if he had a slight urge to finish Helion Rong off here. Helion Rong did not dare to be careless. There was a single star's power gap between the two of them, which meant that he had the capability of killing himself, which in turn made him incredibly dangerous.
Lord Helion is here as well.
Wenren smiled slightly. When his eyes passed over Ling Han, he showed a hint of displeasure. The ghostly dragon cave is a sacred place, and you actually allow an outsider to enter. Do you not fear being reprimanded by our ancestors?
I'm already here, so bite me, Ling Han said.
He knew that Wenren was determined to eliminate both Helion and Xianyu clans, and was a definite supporter of war. Even if he knew the truth about the reckoning, he would definitely first destroy the Helion and Xianyu clans, unite the whole North Sea, establish his royal rule, and then think of a way to stand against the Imperial clan. Thus, even if he wanted to join forces with the Wenren royal clan, he would still have to eliminate this Wenren, so there was naturally no need to be polite. Wenren smiled in spite of himself and asked, Lord Helion, you don't mind if I kill him, right?
Of course I do.
Helion Rong stepped out and declared, This is my son-in-law. Wenren was momentarily stunned. He naturally knew about the Xianyu and Helion clans allying, and also knew that the person that the Helion royal clan sent out for the marriage alliance was Helion Rong's daughter. But how did this son-in-law now become a human?
If I move, can you save him? He asked calmly.
His voice was not loud, but was filled with intimidating threat as if he did not take Helion Rong seriously in the slightest.
Just try.
Helion Rong was not the slightest bit weaker in attitude. However, if Wenren really made a move, he would definitely take everyone with him at the first available instant. Taking him head-on would only lead to death. He did not worry at all that Wenren would harm the other members of the Helion clan, because he, too, would be able to make a move on the junior members of the Wenren clan. It was precisely due to setting king against king, general against general, and pawn against pawn that everyone had a need to quietly adhere to the rules. Of course, if he was killed by Wenren, then there would naturally no longer be any such deterrence. Hee, have I missed something? With a long laughter, Xianyu Tong's figure landed, and stood with Wenren and Helion Rong in the shape of horns. It looked as if he was standing on opposing sides of Helion Rong, but could also be seen as if he was trapping Wenren between himself and Helion Rong. Wenren folded his arms behind his back, and appeared to be extremely calm. He was absolutely confident that even if Xianyu Tong and Helion Rong joined forces, there was no need for him to fear them. But if the two of them worked together, it would be very, very difficult for him to kill Ling Han. He swept aside his sleeves, turned around and left. Merely a bug of the human race. He would be able to crush him with just a flip of his hand anyway, so there was absolutely no need for him to take him to heart. Ling Han, I want a duel with you. At this moment, a shout rang out from behind Xianyu Tong, and an incredibly odd-looking man walked out. There was actually a turtle shell growing on his back, and his arms were two gigantic crab's claws. In the sea race, these were symbols of bloodline purity. This man was Pang Xian. He had simultaneously inherited the spiritual turtle and demonic crab bloodlines, which had reached about 50% in purity. Merely in terms of bloodline purity, he would probably be considered one of the very best. Unfortunately, it was impossible for spiritual turtle and demonic crab to match the true dragon bloodline. Even their 50% of purity would not be able to match 10% purity of the true dragon bloodline. However, the might of the bloodline inheritance should not be underestimated, after all. He had already advanced into the heaven tier in his mere 40s, which was very extraordinary. If not, he would not have been qualified enough to come to the ghostly dragon cave. Ling Han tossed him a look with a smile and asked, Why should I duel with you? I will definitely not allow you to marry Princess Kai. Pang Xian shouted loudly. Ling Han could not help but laugh and asked, When did I say I wanted to marry her? On the other side, Xianyu Kai's pretty face was filled with rage. It was one matter for her not to want to marry Ling Han, but Ling Han actually chose to descend into the ghostly dragon cave to find the fang of the true dragon just to avoid marrying her. This made her extremely displeased. What was so bad about her that would cause Ling Han to flee from her as if running from a deadly snake? As a member of a royal clan, a prodigy, and an exquisite beauty, her pride could not withstand such a blow. Naturally, if Ling Han wanted to marry her, she would refuse, so it was really a contradiction. A lowly human naturally is not qualified to marry Princess Kai. Pang Xian pointed his claw at Ling Han. Today I want to defeat you, and then inform you that you cannot compare to even a 10,000th of Princess Kai, so you should definitely not have any such thoughts. Ling Han shook his head and said, "How baffling. I don't want to bother myself with you." Pang Xian was planning to say something else, but when he saw Xianyu Tong wave a hand, he could only obediently keep his mouth shut. No matter how conceited he was, he did not dare to disobey orders, but he had already made his decision internally. Once they had entered into the ghostly dragon cave, he would find a chance to kill Ling Han and sweep aside all powerful competitors. Only he was qualified to stand by Princess Kai's side. There were still 2 days before the ghostly dragon cave would open. They all waited patiently. Although all 3 great royal clans were present, they did not start fighting. Wasting the energy here would not be worth it. The ghostly dragon cave would be their real battleground. 2 days later, a powerful dragon's might trembled, and the earth split apart, revealing a gigantic maelstrom. Merely the look of the surging water would spark fear in others because there were terrifying patterns concealed within. Most likely, even spiritual infant-tier elites would be crushed instantly by it. Haha, just right in time, we didn't miss it. A loud laughter rang out from the sky, and a colossal aerial warship was quickly flying towards them. It was completely black in color, and there was a flag raised on the top of the warship. There was a black-colored true dragon drawn on the flag, and it was currently brandishing its claws and teeth, and seemed to be filled with soaring murderous spirit. West Sea's Mo Royal Clan. Helian Rong and Xianyu Tong both frowned at the same time. Even Wenren Jie revealed a powerful hostility. The ghostly dragon cave was a fateful opportunity for the North Sea. What was a royal clan of the West Sea here for? Chapter 792. Visitors from the West Sea. Wenren Jie had ambitions to unify the North Sea, and thus naturally regarded it as his private property, especially the ghostly dragon cave, which only opened once every 500 years. To every royal clan, the dragon's bloodgrass that could be gathered within it was an extremely beneficial tonic as it could elevate the purity of their bloodline. What more the true dragons to the pity, it was something absolutely impossible to attain. This was the treasure of the North Sea, so how could they allow people from the West Sea to covet it? What is the Mo clan of the West Sea doing, coming to a distinguished gathering of the North Sea? Wenren Jie was the first to rise up. He was the #1 ace of the North Sea, and in a sense, he was also the local representative. Ha 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 ha, the waters of the 4 seas all belong to the imperial family, so it may be a bit too overbearing for Lord Wenren to put it that way, someone called out from atop the aerial vessel, looking down from above, but did not actually come down. Helian Rong was also irked. His grudges against the Wenren clan weren't small, but facing outsiders, he naturally set them aside first. He opened his mouth and responded, "The waters of the 4 seas naturally belong to the imperial family completely. However, the imperial family has divided and conferred the North Sea to our 3 clans to manage. There is naturally a reason for it. It is seemingly inappropriate that the Mo clan did not even deign to pay greetings and forced its way in, is it not? Hee hee. Is Lord Helian pronouncing the verdict for me?" Hearty laughter wafted over from the aerial vessel, though what could be seen was only a figure gradually coming down from above. He was obviously stepping on air, yet he trod as if walking down from a flight of stairs. This person was an old man who appeared to be in his 60s. His vitality seemed to be somewhat waning, and he was no longer in his prime, yet he still stood ramrod straight. There were several dragon scales on both his cheeks, bestowing him with a strange countenance. Behind him, a dozen youngsters emerged, and also descended from the aerial vessel one after another. Ling Han's eyes narrowed instantly, for he actually caught sight of Su Xiaoran, Small Sword Emperor, Dong Ling the outstanding figures of the 5 ancient clans. Mo Yuan. Xianyu Tong immediately called out, a sense of dread reflecting in the depths of his eyes. Not only him, both Helian Rong and Wenren Jie were also like that. They did not look down on this old man just because he appeared aged and his vitality was waning. Mo Yuan, the clan king from the last generation of the Mo clan. Because of the emergence of a rare gifted genius in the Mo clan 100 years ago, he relinquished the position of the king ahead of time. Otherwise, even if he was to sit on the position till he died of old age, there would not be anyone who would have dared to say anything with his qualifications. He was an antique, but his combat strength was absolutely frightening. Perhaps he might not even lose to one Renjie. I had no choice. These several humans came from the 5 sects of the Middle State just a moment ago. They came out from the Dragon Shrine, bearing the personal orders from the Dragon Emperor that I bring them to Ghostly Dragon Cave for a trip. I had no choice but to reluctantly undertake the task. Mo Yuan laughingly uttered by way of an explanation somewhat. One Renjie and the other ultimate elites all snorted. Even if it was the Dragon Emperor's arrangement that these humans enter into the Ghostly Dragon Cave, should it not be that these people ought to be bringing the personal orders of the Dragon Emperor here to the North Sea to seek them, the 3 great royal clans of the North Sea? Why was the Mo clan from the West Sea the one bringing them over? The reason for this was certainly not as simple as the Mo clan claimed, so there inevitably had to still be something fishy. Ling Han's heart also shivered greatly. Could it be that the 5 great sects have already come to form an agreement with the Sea Race, after which the 2 powerful factions would be joining forces to stand against the Purple Moon Kingdom, and perhaps to wipe out the Great Ling dynasty as well while at it? This was not good news. The strength of the Sea Race was no less than that of the 5 great sects, and might even be superior. With these 2 strong parties joining forces, whether the Purple Moon Kingdom would be able to resist or not was still unknown, but the Great Ling dynasty would be flanked by an elite on both sides. Furthermore, it was fully dependent on their mood whether to act on the Great Ling dynasty. This was horrible. On this trip to the Ghostly Dragon Cave, he had to obtain enough treasures to elevate his cultivation level. Only he himself was the most reliable assurance. Ling Han, you can really run about. Even here I am also able to chance upon you, Su Xiaofan said in a raised voice. Ling Han was astonished to stumble upon them here, yet the 5 of them were actually even more shocked. In reality, the 5 of them had brought personal orders from important persons of the 5 sects in order to present themselves before the Dragon Emperor. Coincidentally, Mo Yuan happened to be there and volunteered for escorting them here. Of course, Mo Yuan did not do it for naught, conveniently getting a few descendants of the Mo clan to enter as well. After all, the Ghostly Dragon Cave was the private property belonging to the North Sea, and the past Mo clan could not have had any part in it at all and could only watch on with envy. In this way, everyone was happy. But how did Ling Han get here? A smile spread across Ling Han's face as he said, I advise you all to refrain from entering, otherwise, you all might possibly lose your lives. The 5, including Su Xiaofan, all revealed a look of anger on their faces. They represented the strongest combat strength of the younger generation, yet this person actually dared to look down on them so much it was abominable. Unable to control herself, Dong Linger taunted, You are merely dependent on a formation. Do you think we'll be unprepared this time? Ling Han uttered an "oh" in response. He managed to con them into telling something about their trump card, although he had yet to know what it was, but it should be able to match the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. As soon as the words left her mouth, Dong Linger realized that she had let the cat out of the bag. However, she was not overly concerned. After all, it was inevitable that she'd need to use this trump card anyways if she were to go up against Ling Han. Where are the personal orders of the Dragon Emperor? One Renjie asked with cold indifference. He had naturally ignored completely the conflicts between juniors like Ling Han and Su Xiaofan's group of 5. Mo Yuan flung his hand out, and a golden scroll was instantly hurled in one Renjie's direction. After catching it, the latter promptly unfolded and glanced through it, and the expression on his face abruptly darkened. He then tossed the scroll over to Helian Rong, who, after looking through it, then gave it to Xianyu Tong. Sure enough, it was clearly from the Dragon Emperor's hand, no doubt about that. They were to properly receive Su Xiaofan's group of 5. They were honored guests. This was a decree from the imperial family. Who in the 4 seas would dare not to abide by it? All 3 powerhouses were feeling dismal. The Ghostly Dragon Cave was clearly the private property of the North Sea, so why should they let outsiders meddle in it? But the Dragon Emperor had already decreed so, and how could they dare not obey? If they did, it would be deemed an act of rebellion, and their whole North Sea would be destroyed. Xianyu Tong then returned the scroll back to Mo Yuan, and sneered while he said, Lord Imo really spared no effort, personally making the trip to attend to this trivial matter. Hee, seeing the looks of you three lords, as ferocious as wolves and tigers, supposing I hadn't personally escorted them, would they not have been swallowed whole by the lot of you already?
Mo Yuan replied just as coldly.
Humph, since the matter has already reached this stage, then just cut the crap, stop wasting time, and promptly enter into the ghostly dragon cave. Wen Jie waved a hand at the juniors at the back, and said, when the ghostly dragon cave is closed, it will expel the living beings in its outer circle. But if you all were to remain inside too long, or have been infected too much by the aura within, you will be assimilated by the ghostly dragon cave, regarded as part of it, and would not be repelled later. With the perilous environment of that place, you all basically would not be able to hold out till 500 years later.
Yes! Everyone shouted obediently.
They all split up and one by one leaped into the center of that big whirlpool, which was the entrance to the ghostly dragon cave. The Wunren royal clan was the first to go, followed by the Xianyu and then the Hellion royal clan. Just when Ling Han was leaping in as well, Su Xiu ran and the others all exuded killing intent.
This person had to be eliminated.
Chapter 793. Blood River. The ghostly dragon cave was a very unique place. It was originally formed from the body of an elite of the sea race. At that time, he had already cultivated to the peak of what was possible, genuinely highest of the highest degree, with a combat strength of 20 stars of shattering void Tyran absolute that others could only give up all hope of ever achieving, for even the immortals that descended to the lower realm could do nothing much against him back then. Although this elite had died, the power of regulation that he had established remained uncorroded in this place throughout the ages, keeping watch over this ghostly dragon cave. It could be said that as long as one's strength was not as strong as this elite from ages ago, then one had to abide by the rules here. Shattering void tier elites could not enter. Any that dared to would be slain. Yet though shattering void tier cultivators could not enter, it did not mean that one could not draw on a shattering void tier cultivator's combat strength. Any decree or forbidden tool could still be used, but ultimately this type of combat strength would not last long. Ling Han held Hellion Sun Shue's hand on one side, and on the other he tugged Hunyo along. Flop, the three of them then jumped into the center of the whirlpool. An unstoppable force pulled them underwater towards the bottom. Just when they were spiraled into a state of obscurity, all of a sudden, they resurfaced in a blood river. Wah! The people who had entered ahead earlier were all vomiting wildly by the riverbank. However, it was apparent that the numbers had greatly reduced as the number of people present was far less than 1/10 of the original total. It seemed that though there was only one entrance, everyone must have been split into batches and sent to different places. Quick, let's leave. Ling Han's expression changed instantly, and he grabbed the two females while leaping up into the air. However, he then gave a mild exclamation of surprise as it struck him that he actually could not fly in this place. Hence, he then dropped from midair once again. He exhaled a breath, leveraging on this force, then propelled himself more than 30 meters horizontally and landed on the riverbank. Hellion Sun Shui was also wearing an unsightly expression. She was feeling dizzy from the spin just now, and only wanted to throw up. Hunyo, on the contrary, appeared as if nothing had happened, and instead was clapping her hands and shouting in excitement, "Let's do it again!" Ling Han looked down at his own clothes. There were traces of corrosive reaction which was caused by the corrosive river water. Although the corrosion rate was very slow, it was extremely persistent, and even if he circulated the indestructible heaven scroll, it could only hamper the speed of corrosion, and would not be able to resolve it. In other words, if he were to soak in the river for too long, even he would also be turned into melted liquid. What was this? Ling Han gazed into the distance. The length of this river was unknown, but the river water was blood red and gave off a faint metallic smell. Could it be that this is the blood of the alternative dragon? Hellion Sun Shui spoke out after gradually catching her breath as she, too, looked upon this river. There was the emergence of a true dragon in this realm before, but absolutely not of one that cultivated to the state of true dragon in this place. This little realm did not have the environment for one possessing the bloodline of the dragon clan to complete the final leap, and at most could only achieve the level of alternative dragon. As such, if this really was an alternative dragon's blood, its value would be indescribable, precious beyond mere words. Ling Han shook his head. Even if it was an alternative dragon's blood, it has already been contaminated, filled with corrosive energy, and as time passes, I reckon even the level 10 precious metal would be eroded away.
Other Shattering Void tier possibly could not, but this alternative dragon had already achieved the combat strength of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier. It certainly must have also cultivated the power of regulation, and with the refining of power of regulation, was there anything in this realm that could not be refined?
Unless it was something not of this realm. This place is really bleak and desolate. Ling Han looked at the surroundings on both his right and left. There was only an extremely narrow space.
Apart from the blood river that lay in the middle and was gushing with what looked to be blood-like water, both sides of the riverbank were merely around 300 meters in width. After that, there was nothing else, looking as if a fault had appeared in the world.
Since this place was formed from an elite's body, naturally one should not have high hopes for it to be like the real world. Which way should we go? Helian Sun Shui asked.
The source, Ling Han answered after pondering. They were just about to set out when they caught sight of a blade's light flashing past a person suddenly charged towards them.
The sword chi that surged forth was filled with a decidedly dense chill that rushed towards them. Ling Han, I am going to kill you. Ling Han took a glance, then very casually stretched out his hand, and using 2 fingers in an effortless motion, he held the opponent's long sword immobilized between his fingers as he responded indifferently. So it seems that Princess Kai has quite the temper. It's best not to have such a hot temper as you'll get old easily. The person who wielded the sword was precisely Xianyu Kai. She tried hard to retrieve her sword, yet discovered to her astonishment that the sword had seemingly grown roots in Ling Han's hand and would not budge no matter how hard she pulled. She was dumbstruck. What kind of a monster was this human? This sword was a level 8 spirit tool. Furthermore, it was of an extremely fine quality, enough to display the combat strength of the peak of the deity transformation tier, but in Ling Han's hand, it was powerless like an infant. Naturally, she had heard of the fight between Ling Han and Xianyu Ziyuan, but she had always thought it to be something of an exaggeration, and surmised that it must have been the strength of the formation entirely. But now that she had the chance to clash with Ling Han, she was suddenly made aware that he was indeed incomparably powerful. Ling Han gave a slight push with his hand, causing Xianyu Kai to abruptly stagger as she fell back. After that, he also released his fingers' hold on her sword and remarked, "For the sake of the Xianyu royal clan, I shall not retaliate this time, but if you persist in not knowing what's good for you, I will let you know what fear is." It was not that he was afraid of the Xianyu royal clan, but rather that the clan was a faction that he could still attempt to gather to his and Hulyen's side. He did not want the amicable ties between the 2 clans to be disrupted because of a haughty little princess like Xianyu Kai. Hang, dragon meat is Nyo's favorite. Hu Nyo said threateningly from the side. There were unshed tears in Xianyu Kai's eyes. This human was too abominable. The elders of her clan had wanted to force her to marry him, and this human actually refused. Now, he was treating her so fiercely, making her feel incredibly aggrieved. What did she do wrong? She was the biggest victim. Let's go. Ling Han did not bother with Xianyu Kai. Although they were all randomly spread out after entering, the 3 great clans already accounted for 99% of the people here. Naturally, there was no lack of people from the Xianyu royal clan, and as such there was no need for him to take care of this delicate little princess. They had but taken a few steps when they noticed that Xianyu Kai actually also followed them. Ling Han halted his steps and asked, "Why are you following us?" "Who said I am following you?" Xianyu Kai countered with her head held high. "Can't I take this path as well?" "Sure, please." Ling Han made a move to give way. Xianyu Kai was secretly irked and she walked past Ling Han in big strides, seeming to have some kind of grudge against the earth as she stomped the ground with vehemence, making thumping sounds. They waited after she had walked a good distance ahead. Only then did the 3 of them start out once again. "Tisk, Tsk, that was a great beauty. Why did you not accept her?" Helian Sun Shui said in a sour tone dripping with envy. Ling Han laughed heartily as he said, "Are you jealous?" "In your dreams." Helian Sun Shui, of course, denied adamantly. "Nyo is jealous." Hu Nyo, not knowing how to hide her feelings, briskly pounced onto Ling Han, dangling with her arms around his neck as she declared, "Ling Han is Nyo's, no one can snatch him." Helian Sun Shui found it laughable. Hunyo appeared to be only 5 to 6 years old, yet clearly gave the impression of wanting to dominate Ling Han exclusively. Such a small little girl, how could she have got such a notion? This place is the first floor of the so-called Blood Dragon Cave? Wasn't it said that there are various kinds of spirit herbs here? Why is it that I don't see anything? Ling Han peered around. The surroundings here were too simple, one could easily see everything at a glance, whether there were any spirit herbs or not. You think the spirit herbs are like vegetables that you'll find growing all over the place? Helian Sun Shui rolled her eyes at him. Ling Han nodded his head and questioned, "Aren't they?" Recalling the spirit herbs that grew in abundance everywhere in the Black Tower that Ling Han possessed, Helian Sun Shui was abruptly rendered speechless. Chapter 794. Dragon's Bloodgrass. Although spirit herbs could be cultivated inside the Black Tower, they were limited by Ling Han's individual ability. Now, aside from Dragon Blood Tyrant Ginseng, there were not many high-grade spirit herbs in it, which made Ling Han feel extremely gloomy. That was because the majority of spirit herbs were useless for him, and he could only consume them after he had extracted their essence with the Heaven Transformation Bowl. As a result, their effects were naturally not as good as after they were concocted into alchemical pills. The amazing trait of spirit herbs was that they not only could increase cultivation, but there were also other effects. For example, every single divine herb of nature had their specific spiritual effects. Thus, Ling Han was quite interested in the spirit herbs here, especially the dragon's bloodgrass. One had to understand something. Now that he had cultivated the 9 dragons tyrant body art, if he refined the dragon's bloodgrass, it might possibly improve this cultivation technique to a dramatic extent. Helian Sun Shui shook her head, and said, "Fateful opportunities always come together with danger. If you want to just harvest spirit herbs casually, that is not possible." "That may not be," Ling Han replied. He had thought of Shen Yuan Zi Guang. This man's luck was a bit unnatural as treasures practically delivered themselves into his lap. Just take the Earth Overturning Seal for example. At the time, it actually threw itself into his arms. If Ling Han had not moved fast enough, this mystical power would have become the latter's possession. The further ahead they walked, the larger this area became. However, there was not much change on either bank. Only the river was widening. It widened from about 30 to the current 300 meters width. Moreover, the tendency did not seem to be changing any time soon. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind and he said, "Since this was formed by an alternative dragon, then this river of blood, could it be was actually its blood veins?" Helian Sun Shui nodded. "Previously, we were at the end of the blood vein, which is why it was narrower. But as we near the main arteries, it would naturally become wider." "Then this is dragon blood? Too bad it has been contaminated by some inexplicable energy so cannot be refined," Ling Han said with pity. "I've heard father say before that there are occasionally 1 or 2 spots that have pure blood and have not been contaminated. If our luck is better, we may still be able to get some," Helian Sun Shui said, her eyes bright. For a person like her who had inherited the dragon bloodline, being able to refine the blood of an alternative dragon would be extremely beneficial even if there were only a few drops. Ling Han nodded. The ghostly dragon cave had existed in the North Sea for who knew how many years. Although it only opened every 500 years, after so many years of experience, Helian Rong naturally must have also gathered enough information. They journeyed for a while longer, and then saw Shen Yukai had stopped in front as if she was waiting for them. Seeing them approach, Shen Yukai said very proudly, "I was not waiting for you all. I had merely gotten a little tired, so I wanted to take a short rest." Ling Han did not react, and passed by her directly, which made Shen Yukai wave her sword furiously. If it was not for the fact that the power difference was too big, she really wanted to catch up to Ling Han and chop off his head. She angrily followed behind the 3 of them. Although she was very proud, she still knew that this was a very dangerous place, and sticking close to Ling Han and his group would greatly increase her chances of survival. Voila! A huge splash suddenly appeared in the river waters ahead of them. They could vaguely see a blood-red thing flash past, but could not see it clearly enough to identify it. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, and glimpsed a long shadow beneath the waters. It felt like a snake, and moved very quickly.
In an instant, it had swiftly left his field of vision, and Ling Han was unable to take a good look. However, Ling Han did not pursue it with his sight. Instead, he stared at the bottom of the stream and asked, "What does dragon's bloodgrass look like?"
It's completely red in color. Typically, it has 3 leaves, which have a dragon-shaped pattern. The older it is, the more leaves there are, and the more distinct the dragon-shaped patterns would be, Helian Sun Shui answered after a momentary daze. Ling Han's expression became even stranger, and he asked, "Does the dragon's bloodgrass grow on the banks?"
"Yes."
Helian Sun Shui nodded. Behind them, Shen Yukai heard them clearly, and could not help but show a disdainful expression. Was there something wrong with this human's head? He had to get to the bottom of the issue for even such a simple matter. Ling Han pointed at the stream and said, "I saw a stalk of dragon bloodgrass there. As you said, it has 3 leaves, and there are patterns on the leaves."
"What?"
Helian Sun Shui exclaimed in shock. "How could that be? Dragon's bloodgrass grows on the banks." Ling Han thought for a moment, smiled and said, "You all only search for dragon's bloodgrass on the banks because you have never entered the stream to look." Upon further thought, Helian Sun Shui agreed. The blood river had a terrifying corrosive ability. Even those that possess the bloodline of a true dragon like them and have developed a sturdy, tough physique could not withstand it. Without waiting too long, their skin would rot, and as time passed, even their bones would melt. Everyone naturally treated the blood river like forbidden territory. Furthermore, there were terrifying monsters in the river, so they were even more unwilling to dive in. Shen Yukai continued to pout. Her first impression of Ling Han was too bad, so she subconsciously took every word he said to be merely playing to the crowd. The dragon's bloodgrass grew at the riverbed? Whom was he trying to fool? This blood river was an obstruction to vision, and sealed one's divine sense, so how was he able to see? Humph! Wait here. Ling Han was about to jump into the river. "Be careful," Helian Sun Shui said quickly. While this blood river did not corrode quickly, the effects were lasting, and could not be resisted by any kind of origin power at all. Moreover, the sea race knew that the wider the blood river was, the stronger the corrosive quality was and the more terrifying the monsters hidden in the water would be. Ling Han nodded, then with a leap, he entered into the river of blood. Shen Yukai could not help but be dumbfounded. This human must have gone mad. Merely bragging was not enough. He actually jumped into the river. Wasn't this seeking his own death? She humphed and said, "I fear he will not be able to return now that he's gone in." Helian Sun Shui flew into a rage and countered coldly, "Shen Yukai, the reason why I have not said anything all the way here is not because I am afraid of you, but rather that I'm giving face to the Shen Yu royal clan. But time and again, you've been unreasonable. Do you think I do not dare to make a move on you?" Shen Yukai could not help but be intimidated by her aura. Only now did she realize that the other party was the most outstanding bright pearl of the young generation of the royal clans of the North Sea. Her bloodline was incomparably pure, and was a brighter existence than even herself. However, she naturally still possessed her pride, and said defiantly, "Did I speak wrongly? That is the blood river, and in it flows the corrosive blood of Lord Alternative Dragon. It represents death and decay." Putting aside the fact that he is a mere deity transformation tier warrior, even if an ultimate elite of Shattering Void tier came, he would not do well, either. That only applies to others. Helian Sun Shui retorted coldly. Shen Yukai was stunned. Did her words mean that Ling Han was capable of accomplishing tasks that even Shattering Void tier elites could not do? Where did her confidence come from? Humph, this woman was really dumb. So much that she has been completely fooled silly by a damn man and could not even understand the simplest logic. Hong! It was at this moment that they saw a wave appear on the blood river, and a gigantic splash shot up into the skies. Soon afterwards, they saw Ling Han step on the waves, his hand holding the Revere life sword. The cold light of the sword blazed as he slashed downwards. Voila! A long blood-colored shadow shot out of the water's surface consequently. At first glance, it was a giant serpent, and was about 10 meters in length. But upon closer look, one would realize that this living creature actually did not have eyes, nostrils, or ears. It only had a huge circular mouth, and when it was open, it showed an array of long, sharp fangs. Chapter 795. Plentiful Harvest. A bloodworm. Helian Sun Shui and Xian Yukai both gasped in shock.
Although neither of them had entered the ghostly dragon cave before, they had studied the data about this place for who knew how many times. Because they had at least one chance to enter this place, they naturally had to have a good idea of the situation here.
Bloodworm was a special life form birthed within the blood of the alternative dragon after its death. It was given life by the alternative dragon, yet was incapable of leaving the latter, and for its whole lifetime, it would be limited by the body of the alternative dragon. But this creature was very powerful. After all, it was born from the blood river, so no matter what, it too had absorbed a little of the blood of the alternative dragon. The bloodworm opened its circular mouth full of sharp fangs, and bit at Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "I allowed you some leeway in the stream, but now that we're out of the water, you still want to be a tyrant?" With a wave of his sword, they only saw blood spurt in all directions. This bloodworm was instantly split in half from head to tail. Its internal organs dropped onto the surface of the river, and gave off an incredibly powerful stench. So powerful. Xian Yukai could not help but gape. She had long heard of the terrible reputation of the bloodworm, but it was killed instantly with a slash from Ling Han. Did that mean that Ling Han was too strong, or that the rumors were wrong, and that the bloodworm was actually not really all that strong? Ling Han turned around, and dropped onto the bank. Helian Sun Shui walked up to him and asked, "Are you all right?" Ling Han shook his head and answered, "I'm fine. There is power of regulation in this blood river, and the strength of corrosion would be different according to individual cultivation level. You know, my physique is a whole tier superior to my cultivation level." Realization instantly dawned on Helian Sun Shui. It was no wonder that the corrosion rate was about the same for everyone that dropped into the river's waters. That was because the majority of them were of the true dragon bloodline, and had developed their physique to the toughness of precious metal of the same level. Thus, the corrosive rate they underwent was naturally about the same. But Ling Han's physique was on a higher level than his cultivation level. Thus, though he too would face corrosion, its rate would be far slower than the rulers of the sea race. In comparison, actually he was the real ruler. "Hey, where's the dragon's blood grass?" Xian Yukai asked from a distance. She did not like the way Ling Han looked so proud, and always felt an urge to attack him. "You are indeed very awesome to be able to kill the bloodworm, but didn't you previously say you discovered the dragon's bloodgrass? So where is it now? What business is it of yours?" Helian Sun Shui shot her a glare, and Hunyo was even more ferocious. "Why don't we have a meal of dragon stew?" Ling Han paid no attention to this opinionated little princess. With a shake of his right hand, he showed it to Helian Sun Shui, then put it away. Instantly, Helian Sun Shui's beautiful eyes lit up. The dragon's blood grass. Indeed, dragon's blood grass also grew on the riverbed, and from the look of things now, only Ling Han was capable of getting a hold of it, and what did that mean? Uncountable amounts of dragon's blood grass were beckoning towards them. Putting aside the fact that there were enough to let his son build his foundations, there was enough even for Ling Han's use. In a matter like this, it was best to make great profits on the down low. There was no need to let Xian Yukai know. And when she saw Ling Han could not produce the dragon's bloodgrass, Xian Yukai was even more disdainful. She had confirmed that Ling Han was a conman, and Helian Sun Shui was so dumb that she was completely fooled to the extent that she did not even doubt him. Meanwhile, Ling Han communicated with Small Tower, wanting to know if the dragon's bloodgrass could grow within the Black Tower. Upon getting an affirmative answer, he could not help but be greatly pleased. But soon, he became disappointed, because the Black Tower could only speed up the growth of the dragon's bloodgrass, yet was incapable of obtaining seeds from it. That was because this thing didn't even bear seeds, and was completely birthed from the alternative dragon. Thus, it could only be nurtured here. Since it did not bear seeds, fine. 3 leaves becoming 4, or even 5 or 6 would be great. As the effects improved, that was equivalent to having a few more stalks growing anyways. As they walked, Ling Han kept activating the Eye of Truth to find the dragon's bloodgrass on the riverbed. It was nurtured from the blood of an alternative dragon. It was literally growing unsullied out of the mud, removing the dangers of the corrosive blood, leaving behind only the effects of refining one's physique and increasing power. Where there was dragon's bloodgrass, there would be bloodworms standing guard. So naturally, fighting was inevitable. These bloodworms were all on the level of the heaven tier. There were some that had even reached the battle prowess of 10 stars of the heaven tier. Even Ling Han would have to use the maximum of his abilities to kill them off. In 3 days, they had gathered over 100 stalks of dragon bloodgrass, which made Hellion Sun Shui incredibly excited. One had to know that even the numbers gathered by a whole clan in the past years might not reach this much. Who asked only Ling Han to be capable of going into the river? Shen Yukai was even more speechless. This human put an act time and time again, but every time, he came back empty-handed. After so many times, Hellion Sun Shui actually still trusted him. It was practically inconceivable. What happened to the aloofness of a ruler of the sea race? And the nobility?
You've tossed all that away to the end of the horizon, huh?
The first level of this ghostly dragon cave was incredibly huge. On the 4th day that they had arrived, multiple rivers of blood originating from various spots gathered here, forming a supergiant lake, just like a huge sea. Yet there was a small island in the center of this lake. On the island, there was a white tower-like structure. According to hearsay, this was a passageway, and one could travel down it to the 2nd floor. After arriving here, they would have to think of some way to cross the lake. Otherwise, if they were not able to reach the small island, how could they advance to the 2nd floor? There were already some people crossing the lake. After so many years, all 3 great royal clans had their strategies, and discovered that vessels made from the bones of rulers of the sea race could resist the corrosion of the bloodwater for a very long period of time. These bones were naturally left behind by those elites of the sea race that had already passed away. Their skulls would be buried in their ancestral shrine, but their other bones would be left behind. Not only would they be used to cross this place, the bones of Shattering Void Tier could also absolutely be used to forge spirit tools possessing immense might. Previously, they had all been randomly sent to the ends of various veins, but now they were all gathered again. Ling Han saw Su Xiaofan and the others. They were sitting on a bone raft, heading towards the island on the lake. In the process of passage, the bone raft was continuously being corroded.
Upon estimation, it would probably last just long enough for them to reach the island on the lake, and then it would just about fall apart.
Hellion Sun Shui also drew out a bone raft from her spatial spirit tool.
Since they had ventured here, it was natural that she would not come unprepared.
This bone raft was very small, and looked like it could only accommodate 5 people. However, if 3 people climbed aboard, it would be considerably spacious. Shen Yukai gave a humph, and took out a bone raft as well. For someone like her whose status was higher, she would have a bone raft of her own, unlike others who still had to cross the lake with another. She followed closely behind Ling Han's group. She was waiting with bated breath to see how Ling Han would be defeated. As Ling Han propelled the raft with oars, he kept looking at the lake bed. Suddenly he gasped loudly and said, "We've hit the jackpot."
"Another dragon's blood grass?"
Hellion Sun Shui asked with pleasant surprise. "Not only is there dragon's blood grass, it's one with 4 leaves." Ling Han replied, smiling. This time, even Hellion Sun Shui could not stay calm. Even if there was only 1 extra leaf, the effects were completely different from ones with only 3 leaves. Ling Han did not immediately dive below. Instead, he looked at the lake bed and said, "However, this stalk of dragon's bloodgrass has a big guy standing guard." By the dragon's bloodgrass, there was coiled a bloodworm that was shockingly about 30 meters long. Even through the lake water, Ling Han could still sense how terrifying this great worm was. The Shattering Void Tier, it was definitely in the Shattering Void Tier. Otherwise, it could not possibly exude such intimidating pressure. If it's too dangerous, it would be best not to take risks, Hellion Sun Shui advised. Although spirit herbs were great, how could they be more important than life? Ling Han nodded and said, "I'll set out an array to kill it." Tong. He jumped into the water. The ice dragon earth-blasting array was set out, and followed him as he dived towards the bottom of the lake. However, Ling Han immediately discovered that the corrosive property of the lake waters here was obviously much stronger. Even if he possessed a physique a whole tier superior to his cultivation level, he felt incredible pressure. His skin had already begun to corrode. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.